right. What's going on?
I can still hear you, but I see this weird screen.
The Radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody. Welcome to Yaron and Nikos show, Dialogues. We are excited to do another show today. It's Sunday, August 16th, and we're talking about Mao Zedong. And you know, it's an interesting time to talk about Mao. He's getting a little bit of a rewriting in the West. I think thanks to evil people like Hassan Paika, who is a huge Mao fan, and went to the mausoleum in Beijing and talks about him quite frequently. I've recently read articles that say China could have never had the economic growth that it had in the 80s and 90s if not for the industrialization, the base of industrialization that Mao created. I see you already laughing. That's a good sign. So Mao is having kind of a moment in America. I think. I don't think anywhere else. Maybe in Europe. I don't know what the attitude is in Europe.
And maybe also in China. So
in China, I think because one of the things about Mao is that they suppress all the bad news. So all the bad stuff he did is suppressed. You can't find it on the internet in China. It's not available. So the Chinese don't know, particularly young Chinese, don't know the horrors of what happened. And the mausoleum is right there in red in the middle of Tiananmen Square. And I remember being there, and it's creepy because long lines of people are waiting to go in and pay respects to Mao. And you think, do you know what Mao did to your parents and grandparents and what he inflicted on your country? But many of them don't. So many of them have no clue. I've talked to Chinese, and in China you have to be very careful because if you're Chinese, you get negative social points if if you talk negatively about Mao. So in China, they just don't know. And it's interesting when the Chinese come to the US, for some of them, it's a shock. And, those who are honest and willing to engage with it, others just pretend that it's, Western propaganda. So we're going to give you the straight shoot. If there are any Chinese out there listening to the Yaron and Nikos show, let us know. I'm curious about a kind of a Chinese perspective in terms of what you know, what you were taught, what is discussed in China, what is not about Mao. Of course, there's still a lot of people who attribute China's current success to the Communist Party, to communism. We're not going to talk much about kind of post-Mao China. We'll talk a little bit, but not much about post-Mao China. But I think what we'll talk about, given Mao, should dispel any idea that there is anything, and I emphasize anything, positive about Mao Zedong's rule in China. So,
and what we'll say is not just secondary sources. How many people in the West have this? This is the Little Red Book. This is a version from the 1960s. So not the original, but this has probably been the most read book in the world after the Bible, simply because hundreds of millions of Chinese had to read it. And it was called the Little Red Book because it was the size that it could fit in the pocket of workers and soldiers.
and it's a short book and an easy read because it's mostly sayings, right?
Yes, it's little quotes, but we'll get to that when the time.
Yeah, but I'll just say I remember a time because I was alive back then. In the 70s, Mao was huge. I mean,
no question. And we also have here evidence on how huge he was among Western intellectuals that are celebrated as intellectual giants and as intellectual celebrities. And we have all the proof here and all the evidence here.
All right, but let's start indeed at the beginning, and let's talk. I mean, I can say a few things, or you can, about China, where China is at the beginning of the 20th century.
Yes. So it's important in what type of world Mao grows up. So he's born in 1893 in a rural area towards the south. And he's part of the one or two generations that experience the decline of China from an empire to a punching bag, basically. So his early years of Mao coincide with the decline under the Qing dynasty. So the Qing dynasty for almost 250 years led China to some expansions. And yet, at the end of the 19th century, it leads to disasters. We have famines. Funny enough, actually not funny enough, but interestingly enough, famines related to the El Nino effect. So we're going to hear this year, oh, the El Nino climate change. Actually, it used to impact countries already from back then. But most importantly, international humiliation, international patronage at the hands of Japan. They have a military defeat by Japan. They lose Taiwan. They lose the Korean Peninsula. And also they have patronage by Western powers. And this will be very important because Mao grows up with this image of his mind that we used to be a great country, a great empire, and now we are humiliated. And now we are at the mercy of imperialists, at the mercy of alien forces.
I mean, it's important to note. I mean, look, China actually did have a very impressive history. If you go back to the pre-18th century, arguably, China for 2,000 years was more advanced than the West. It really is only probably the 18th and 19th century where the West advances faster than China. If you think about many of the technologies that the West embraced, the printing press, maybe most dramatically, gunpowder, silk, and many other things came from China. China was this mysterious place on the other side. So they came from a tradition where they believed that they were like the rulers. They had ruled the world. And then come the 19th century, and they're humiliated by Great Britain, by other European powers. And I think it's Shanghai. Shanghai during the late 19th century is divided into 4 quarters, in which each one controlled by one by Japan, one by Britain. I can't remember who the other 2 are, but these are foreigners who are controlling major parts of China, and clearly the other thing that's clear to them is they've fallen behind technologically, they've fallen behind economically to the West, in spite of the fact that they used to be superior to them.
Exactly. And in 1911, the last emperor of the Qing dynasty falls, and there is, quote, a republic declared. Now, it's actually chaos in the country. The country is ruled by different warlords. Picture something like Syria after the fall of Assad. At the same time, though, what is the big news that happened in the world? The revolution in Soviet Union. So 1919, we have the establishment of the Communist International. 1920, the Communist International, led by Moscow, controlled by Moscow, they send some emissaries in China to find people who can form a communist party. They're not yet communist in China, so they're looking for intellectually curious people who could be persuaded that there is this theory which is called Marxism, and something might come out of this. So in 1921, they formed the party, and in the first meeting of the Chinese Communist Party, there are 13 people, 1 from Soviet Union, 1 from Netherlands, and 13 Chinese, so 15 in total. Smaller than a meetup. And one of the Chinese people who was present there was a guy called Mao Zedong. Within 5 years, it gets to some tens of thousands of members, but we need to remember, China is a country at that point of 500 million people. So when the Chinese communists start making some noise, occupying some areas, fighting the different warlords, the different authorities, fighting the nationalists under Chiang Kai-shek who tries to unite the country, they are 0.1% 1 of the population. But they are supported by Soviet Union. Soviet Union, who at the same time, though, prompts the nationalists of Kuomintang. That's the nationalist organization.
Yep.
Now, why does the Soviet Union help the nationalists and the communists? Because they have in their mind the number one priority is to kick out the imperialists, to kick out the Westerners and the Japanese. And then we'll see what we'll do.
Mm-hmm.
So Chiang Kai-shek, who is the leader of the nationalists, does this fatal mistake that he trusts the Soviets. And the Soviets actually, they make him feel important. There are May Day parades in the late 20s in Soviet Union where you have the posters of Marx, Lenin, Stalin, and Chiang Kai-shek.
Huh.
And he does not understand that the Soviets use him as a tool against Western and Japanese imperialism, and soon he will understand that this will be a tragic mistake.
So, so at what point do the Russians take a side, or do they take a side?
They don't take a side, but what they do is they help and they save the communists every time they are about to be destroyed by the nationalists. Mm-hmm. So the nationalists and the communists, they are not relatable in power. The nationalists are multitudes of times more important and more powerful than the communists. And that's why every now and then they destroy the communists. They slaughter them. But every time they slaughter them, Soviet Union intervenes and says, to continue our aid to you, you have to become friends again. And the same they say to the communists. Yes, maybe there has been some misunderstandings. They've slaughtered some thousands of you, but you have to unite because this is what the interest of the world proletariat actually requires.
Yep.
Now, in these early days, Mao is not even the official leader of the Communist Party, but he is, and usually he goes from area to area in the mountain. He captures some remote areas in the mountain. He forms something like a Soviet, a People's Republic, which is actually a realm of violence. Mostly he prompts envy. So he tells to the poor farmers, you are poor because of these landowners. There are mass atrocities against the landowners. And this is how he appeases the farmers, but also he gives them some land. But he's very good in a thing that most communists, actually most in every movement, they're not good at. Mao understands that people don't understand abstractions. So he speaks in very simple slogans. He knows that I'm dealing with illiterate peasants, and he uses a language that they can understand. So it's mostly in these simple dichotomies. Peasant versus landlord, the haves versus the have-nots. And he does this other thing where he takes popular songs, traditional Chinese songs, he takes the lyrics and he makes them communist anthems. And this becomes very catchy in China. So people who have never heard anything about Marx or Lenin, they have heard of this guy called Mao Zedong. They have heard of these people who come with red flags and they bring with them land, or they bring with them the promise of some liberation. And the other thing that he distinguishes himself in is an understanding of guerrilla warfare. Mao is the model that later the Vietnamese will follow, which means our guerrilla army, when we occupy a land, becomes a regular army. How did the Vietnamese, they had in the North Vietnam, the proper People's Army, in the South Vietnam, the Viet Cong.
Yep.
Mao has this very flexible guerrilla tactics, a combination of guerrilla, tactical army, infiltrating an area, establishing a base, then moving this base somewhere else. So he paves the way for all future communist guerrillas armies, as we saw in East Asia. So this is how he makes a name for himself. This doesn't mean, though, that he does not experience huge defeats. In 1934, the nationalists, for once more, crush the communists, and then you have the Long March. So Mao takes his army from, picture South China, and he makes a semicircle towards the north. This is a long march, which is the equivalent of the distance Los Angeles to New York, back to Los Angeles.
Wow.
And Mao does this in 1 year, and it completely destroys his army.
So how many people start the march?
I think something like 8,000 end the march. 8,000
Yeah, I know it's something between 80 to 90,000 started.
Yes, I know that 90% perish. You are good
Yep.
in maths. If 8,000 are left at the end,
Yep.
and 90% perish, how many began it?
80,000.
80,000.
Yep.
So, of course, Mao, actually, and the Chinese propaganda, the Long March is seen as a military genius maneuver. It is seen as something which is a particularly heroic endeavor. Actually, it was almost the complete destruction of the Chinese. The only reason they were not completely destroyed is, again, because of Soviet intervention and some. Basically, he's very lucky. We see this time and again with the worst people in history. We see it with Hitler, we see it with Mao, with Lenin. There are these small moments where they could be destroyed, and then you think how different history would be. Anyway, the other important thing,
just a note, he loses people in battle. He loses people for disease.
and from
you know,
desertion.
They cross rivers, people drown. I mean, it's a logistics and military disaster. But he somehow ends it stronger within the Communist Party than he began it.
Well, there are not that many left high officials in the party. Again, he's lucky. The leader of the party dies of natural causes. The other important thing that happens in the 30s, though, is the Japanese invasion. So 1931, the Japanese invade in Manchuria. People are going to hear a lot today the term Manchuria. Manchuria is northeast China.
It's a part of China with the border with North Korea. So it's an extension of North Korea into the Korean Peninsula into the mainland.
I should have brought the map. Anyway, and also below.
You can draw a map of China on your whiteboard.
I'm so bad at drawing. I should have done this already. Anyway, it's below Russia and beside Korea. This is going to become important later. And in 1937, Japan attacks the rest of China. So here we have the very weird thing. The nationalists are fighting the Japanese. The nationalists under Chiang Kai-shek are fighting the Japanese. The communists have one battle with the Japanese. They are obviously obliterated. And then they say, we're going to sit that out. Let the nationalists kill each other with the Japanese. We're going to stay somewhere there in the mountains, towards also Mongolia, towards, we're safer there, close to Soviet Union. And we'll wait to see how this played out. This will prove to be very important. Remember also, Soviet Union has a pact with Japan. Our ally in World War II has a pact with Japan, and they're so eager after, where do they have the pact? After 41, they're so eager not to alienate the Japanese that, as we said in a previous episode, when American pilots find themselves in Soviet soil, the Soviets put them in POW camps, and this is the time when the United States are so generously helping the Soviet Union. And the thank you of Soviet Union is actually to do everything not to offend the Japanese, including telling Mao, keep it quiet, let the nationalists do the fighting with the Japanese. Shall we say also something about how Mao becomes famous in the West at that time? Because it is due to an American journalist.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's a guy called Edward Snow who travels to China. He meets Mao, and he writes a book in 1937 called Red Star Over China. And he portrays the Chinese communists as these freedom fighters. And this is something, if Mao had written that book, it wouldn't be much different from the final version. But the tragedy is that this book, because Snow is a good writer, becomes very popular in England, very popular in the United States. So when the Americans will hear again the name Mao Zedong in 1945, the images that will come to their mind is, oh, it is this guy who we've read about some years ago, and he was presented as agrarian reformer. The big line by Snow is that these are not dangerous radical communists, these are agrarian reformers. And this term became so prominent that Ayn Rand captured it and used it sarcastically whenever she wanted to portray how idiots in the West misunderstood communists, and particularly Asian communists. Quote, agrarian reformers.
So what did the Communist Party, before it gained power, so during these years, what did it actually stand for? What was Mao Zedong preaching, and how did it constantly, other than Soviet aid, I mean, they must have been able to convince people to come to their side. How did they constantly reconstitute themselves and gain support?
Yes, so already at that time, what today in our mind we have as Maoism, the thought of Mao Zedong, is already there. So what is the essence of Maoism? So Mao tries to translate Marxism in a Chinese situation. And the Chinese situation is that less than 1% of the population is the proletariat, urban workers. So if you hope that workers are going to be your revolutionary potential, you're going to have to wait for long. Yep. So Mao transforms Marxism to a set of principles that elevate the farmers, the peasants actually, the poor peasants, as the revolutionary subject. So they are the poor masses, but also very important, they are uncorrupted by the urban capitalist decadence. Mao fuels all the time these envious feelings of the peasants, not only against the rich peasants. So this is why he becomes popular, not just because of violence, but because he murders the rich peasants and he gives the land to the poor peasants. Of course, as we're going to see, soon he's going to take that land away. But in the first years, if you are a poor peasant and you're not particularly thoughtful, this sounds like a good deal. But also it tells them, you are the pure people. These people in the city are corrupted. And they are also corrupted because they're too intellectual. So Mao had this idea that reading too much corrupts your mind, which is weird because Mao made a living selling books in his early life. So he said, if you read more than 12 books, you don't need to read more than 12 books. 12 books, he said, is the proper amount a book that you should read. And of course, later the number fall to one book. This book was enough. So he boosted, let's say, the status. He made the farmers feel, the peasants feel important. And another essence of his idea was that manual labor is a purifying factor, that it's work with your hands. So this was, again, something that he took from Marx, and he created something of his own, that it is through working with your hands that you get access to the truth. And this is a scary foreshadowing of horrible things that will come in future decades in Mao's China, where, for example, if you are a doctor who is taught by books versus if you are a proletarian who has the will to be a good doctor, the proletarian is to be trusted more because he has worked the land, and through this work, he has gotten this better contact with reality, how to put it. So there's something. I mean, I don't know if maybe
it's amazing how these materialists are such mystics. right? And they really are. I mean, these Marxist materialists are complete mystics, and this is a great example of exactly that.
Oh, and we're gonna see. And bad ideas don't just make you stupid. These bad ideas later are going to cost tens of millions of lives. This mysticism, we're gonna see more on that.
So the war ends in 1945.
1945, yes.
And Japan withdraws from China, whatever. And so what happens when Japan withdraws?
First of all, while Japan is on China, let's remember one of the worst occupations. We have the rape of Nanjing, Unit 731. Don't Google it, people, before you go to sleep. And also, overall, the death toll in China from the Japanese occupation was 15 to 20 million, if I remember well. So we're talking about a horrendous. So China is, as the end of World War II, find China destroyed. Now, the most important thing about the future of China happens actually very far away from China. Happens in the meetings between Roosevelt and Stalin. And Churchill at that point is like a sidekick. God knows why, or actually we can cut him some slack and think why, but Roosevelt tries to persuade Stalin to get involved in the Pacific Front. And Stalin conveniently decides to get involved literally in the last 2 days of the war.
Yep.
We have the bomb falls in Hiroshima. Stalin intervenes in the war. The Red Army attacks Manchuria, the north of China, and pushes the Japanese away from there. Next day, we have the bomb in Nagasaki. A few days later, the war is over. So Stalin, funded by the West, by mechanized units, funded by the Lend-Lease, kicks the Japanese away from Manchuria and then hands over initially to Chiang Kai-shek. Remember, at that point, Chiang Kai-shek, the national leader, is the proper leader of China. But he keeps the weapons and he gives both Japanese weapons and Soviet weapons to Mao. So slowly, the Soviets, after they loot Manchuria in the same way they loot Eastern Europe, they hand in parts to Mao, and they very generously support Mao. While Stalin supports Mao, what does the West do with Chiang Kai-shek? Again, the legitimate government of China. They undermine.
Legitimate in what sense? I mean, there were elections?
No, that's a good story. That's a good question. No, there were not elections. I think the only elections took place in 1913. The only elections in the history of China. But he was the one who unified the country. He was the one with whom the Allies were discussing. So he was the one who could claim, I have some he was the one who fought the Japanese, important. So after the war, in every country, you try to find someone who you had some common understanding of what tomorrow will bring, and someone who could show some control over territory. But Chiang Kai-shek has more and more trouble in controlling territory because Mao, helped by the Soviets, is getting more control, particularly on the north. And the Americans decide that Chiang Kai-shek is not to be trusted. They believe Stalin. So think about what type of people we're talking about. They go to Stalin and the foreign ministry people, and they ask him, what do you think about the Chinese communists? And Stalin tells them, they're not communists. They are Chinese Republicans. They're Chinese nationalists. But don't worry, they're not communists. And the Americans say, oh, okay, then maybe we can trust them. And then they push Chiang Kai-shek to cooperate with the nationalists. And when Chiang Kai-shek reacts, Americans say, okay, then we're not going to give you any more support. So there is a boycott, I think, between some point late 46 to early 47. There is a boycott in giving weapons to Chiang Kai-shek that he had already ordered. And this gives Mao a boost to keep going further and further and further towards the south. At this point, there's practically a civil war in China, and Mao has a momentum, and he's pushing and pushing and pushing Chiang Kai-shek. By the way, I hear a faint echo. Maybe our audience can tell us if they hear it as well. Hopefully not.
Can you guys hear an echo?
I can hear my voice from somewhere.
Unfortunately, there are people in the chat there's somebody in the chat who keeps, I keep blocking and he keeps showing up again. God.
Anyway.
They say they do have a, have you guys heard an echo the whole time or just now? No echo, very faint echo. Is it just now or the whole time?
Well, very faint echo is not... Okay,
that's weird.
Okay, now I don't hear it. Oh no, now okay. I hear it again. Also, we should tell people we're testing a new software today. This is why we are trying to make sure it works.
Yeah, Linda says it was just now, just slightly. Gail says no. It sounds like it's not huge, but let's, can you hear it again?
Okay, I'll keep talking and I'll tell you if I can hear it again. Oh, I think it disappeared. Anyway, so even when aid reaches the nationalists, it is just a fraction, a very small fraction of what the United States gives to the Europeans. So it's something like 2% of what the Marshall Plan gave to Europe. Only 2% reaches China, reaches the nationalists. So to cut a long story short, Mao actually prevails in China. Now it's important how he prevails, because the main reason he manages to defeat the nationalists is because he's willing to do things that even the nationalists, who are not doves, even they cannot do. And I will give the example of how the communists occupied the town of Changchun, which is in Manchuria. It used to be the capital of Manchuria. I don't know if it is still today. So in 1948, they set a perimeter around the city, and their solution is, we're going to starve the city. There is a nationalist garrison in the city, and civilians are not allowed to escape, and tens of thousands of civilians are caught in a no man's land. There's constant artillery bombarding in the city, and 150,000 civilians, I repeat, 150,000 civilians perish. And this is how the city falls in the hands of communists. So the communists say, we don't care if every person, every civilian in the cities that we try to occupy dies. What we want is to take control of the cities. And after that, actually Shanghai, I think, falls in a few days. So now
there's a lesson somewhere.
In the immortal words of James Taggart, I couldn't help it.
That's right.
Okay, so, but it was a perfect timing, because it was just when Mao was coming to power. So now we can see how it looked like with China under Mao, China becoming communist. So October 1949, in the most official way, in the Tiananmen Square, he declares the People's Republic of China.
Yep. And Chiang Kai-shek escapes to what is today Taiwan,
yes,
and establishes his republic over there. So what are the allies? What is the U.S. once Mao declares the government in China? Do they recognize him? What do they do at that point?
Well, remember, very soon there's going to be the war in Korea. So reality will hit them very, 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 very soon. So the first country that recognizes him is obviously Soviet Union. It will take some time for the Americans to recognize him. So by 1947, they resume their aid to Chiang Kai-shek, but now it is too late. It becomes clear that Mao is taking over.
Okay, so Mao's government is established in 1949. What does he actually do in those first, in let's say the first decade of his rule?
So in the first decade, he does something that China never had experienced in the past. He initiates a caste society. Population is divided in 11 different classes, which are simplified in two categories: the red category and the black category. Red category is all the classes that are friends of the regime: poor workers, poor farmers, soldiers. And then there are the unfriendly classes. Now, this is a classification that is crucial and will determine not just one's fate in life, it also will seal the fate of their children, because your status, red or black, is transferred to your children. And the reason they do this is because they take Marxism seriously. They say, look, your consciousness is impacted by your environment, is determined, actually, not impacted, determined by your environment. So if you grew up in a bourgeois household, you're going to be a bourgeois throughout your life. Maybe we can send you to a labor camp, and maybe this will change slightly your consciousness, but you are an enemy for life. Now, this is collectivism in all its ugliness. We grew up hearing that collective responsibility is something that the Nazis did. Turns out that the ones that actually, it was not just the Nazis, also the communists were officially, and we saw this also with Stalin, officially operating under the premise of collective responsibility, that the crimes, imaginary crimes of your parents also fall to the children. And it becomes worse because the children of black classes become fair game for institutional harassment. For example, for bullying in school. Can we picture teachers encouraging kids to bully other kids? The life of the kids of, quote, black classes is a nightmare already from school. They're fair game to harassment, to beatings.
So other than the bourgeois, who else would be in a kind of a black class?
Well, obviously people who had some land and people who were rich peasants. These were and of course, anyone who had anything to do with the previous regime, administrators. So the people who were holding society before the communists took over. The other thing that the communists did when Mao came to power, they would organize society in households. So now your life would become more communal. We talk about life in capitalism is too individualistic. Here's what the alternative is. That imagine, let's say, 20 families coming together. And they elect, quote elect, it is the local party cell chooses, who is the leader of this household. Now, the leader of this household is the one who can distribute, for example, who will distribute, who will get what in terms of soap, in terms of food. He's the one in charge of your ratio cards. So imagine if your meal or your soap depends on your communist neighbor. And this was a system that consciously was very bureaucratic. So everything you asked, you had to require it from the household, which means the 20 other families. So you should explain, why do you need new clothes? Oh, you have a new baby. Why did you give birth to a new baby? Does it remind you anything, by the way?
No.
20th century motor company.
Yeah, I mean, yes.
You have to qualify
everything. Justified. Everything has to be justified by the group.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also there, for the first time, we find what later most people know as struggle sessions. At that point, it is known as bitterness sessions, which means that you have to criticize each other, but also criticize yourself. You have to find reasons why you were not a good communist. And the way
that Chinese communists invent this, or is this something they adopted from Russia?
Well, in Russia, they had the self-criticism. And I mean, even in my experience in the communist youth, there are remnants of this. but it is in China, it becomes something terrifying, and it's still present, by the way, today in North Korea.
Yep.
And if you remember in Cambodia, in the episode of Cambodia, we brought the example that you had to dig very deep inside yourself, because every time you have to come up with something. So you remember that guy in Cambodia who said, this week I was very selfish because I kept a journal with personal thoughts. And similar things come up in China. The way an official put it, everyone should know everyone else's intimate thoughts. Careful, not secrets, thoughts. Your thoughts became now communal. This is the warmth of collectivism. And one last thing. Some of the people who were humiliated were the best communists, because this was a society that wanted, to put it in with the living terms, more Pavel Sierovs, not Andrei Taganovs. So people who fought very bravely for communism now found themselves sidestepped because a communist who thinks for himself is a danger for a communist regime once the regime comes to power. And another thing which reminds us of Atlas Shrugged, the capitalists and the entrepreneurs, they have to handle in their property titles voluntarily.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if Ayn Rand took the idea where Reardon has to voluntarily, if she took it, because this was happening in China in the early 50s. And if they did not do that, they were terrorized in all possible ways. Imagine a factory manager.
So it's voluntary, right?
At that point, it is still voluntary. Of course, if you don't do it, very bad things would happen to you.
Yeah, exactly.
And the other characteristic that happens is I was about to say downwards egalitarianism, but egalitarianism is always downwards. It's trying to suppress everything towards making society uglier. So, for example, there is makeup is banned. Women cannot wear makeup. Everyone needs to cut their hair in the same way. People who had studied in good universities abroad and would make excellent administrators, they are sent to humiliating jobs in the countryside. Which reminds me again, they don't want to live, they want you to die. They would rather have bad managers in the communal factories or whatever, rather than good managers who were people of skill.
So this is already happening in the first decade of Mao's rule.
In the first 5 years already.
First 5 years. And now most of Chinese population at this time, and for a long time, is rural. Most of it is not living in the cities. To what extent, what are they doing in those rural communities in all over China?
Initially, they take the land from private owners and nationalize it. But nationalize it means the people who work the land can still have some control. How they farm, of course, they have to pay a particular tax in kind, but they still have some control. Progressively, this is not anymore the case. Progressively, now the land is farmed collectively. And we are yet before the Great Leap Forward.
Yeah.
We are before the Great Leap Forward. So when the Great Leap Forward happens, the land is already collectivized. I want to give, though, before we get to the Great Leap Forward. So the biggest horror in the history, perhaps, of humanity in terms of a man-made disaster is the Great Leap Forward. But before we even get to the Great Leap Forward, China is a nightmare. And I want to give 3 quick examples. The first is the destruction of the equivalent of the kulaks, the rich landlords. And this happened through quotas. So the Communist Party said in every province, 1% of the population is landlords. Therefore, you have to find X amount of landlords. So in a town of 20,000 people, you should find 20 landlords to publicly purge and publicly execute and destroy. But what if they're
only 20, even if they're only 15?
What if there's 0?
Yeah.
So this means that you have to come up with imaginary landlords, which means that this wakes up the worst instincts in people. you hold a grudge to someone, you like someone's wife, you denounce him as a landlord. And what happens to landlords is primordial forms of terror. How they're called on TV, warnings, trigger alerts.
Trigger alerts, yeah.
Trigger alerts, seriously trigger alerts. One of the ways they would execute landlords was by burying them alive, and there was a very specific reason for that. This happened through all the villagers. So the landlords would dig their own grave, but then all the villagers would throw rocks and sand on them. Why? So that everyone would be part of this. So everyone would be a killer in a way.
Mhm.
Therefore, the regime now has made a killer of you, and now you see your fate tied to the fate of the regime. So the characteristic of communism in China is it wakens up the worst possible instincts and the worst possible character traits in a person. And the difference with Soviet Union is that the terror is anarchistic. So you have lynchings, burying alive. You don't have these things in Soviet Union. In Soviet Union, terror is by the book. You'd be arrested by the secret police by the book. You'd be interrogated by the book. There were specific torture methods, all by the book. And the execution would be always by the book. Bullet in the back of their head. In
Chinese
China,
are more entrepreneurial.
sorry?
The Chinese are more entrepreneurial.
They're more entrepreneurial in a primordial way.
Yep.
The second example of terror I want to give is the purge of pets, of cats and dogs. The only people who I've seen in my life purging pets were actually Hamas in October 7th. Turns out the Chinese had already done it, and it's a story which is beyond horrifying. I uploaded a video the other day. It got my channel demonetized, but it's worth it because it's the truth, and it's an absolutely heartbreaking story. And it's interesting also why they did it. Because they said pets are a relic of a bourgeois past.
Mhm.
Why do you need a pet?
Yeah.
A pet means that something is of value to you. Why
As
do
an
you love this
individual.
pet and not the proletariat?
Yep.
And the third very quick example is what they did to the lepers, to people who had leprosy. So leper colonies were previously run semi-efficiently by charities or by missionaries. Of course, these charities were dissolved. So what did they do to the lepers? Again, trigger alert. They burned them alive because they were afraid to get close to them. At best, they let them run to the mountains where they would die of starvation or cold, or they would burn them alive. So again, we see this pre-modern, I don't know how to put it, primordial barbarism.
Yeah.
And again, the great leap forward where all the barbarism would be unleashed in an industrial scale hasn't yet started. So already from the first 6-7 years of communist rule, we have something like 5 million victims. Again,
Wow.
many of them dying in unimaginable ways.
Horrific ways. So what happens to get us to the Great Leap Forward? What is Mao trying to achieve with the Great Leap Forward? And then, of course, tell us what it actually is.
Before the Great Leap Forward, do you want to talk very quickly about the Korean War? Because it happens in between.
Sure, but let's make it short because
Okay.
I think the material in the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution are more
Okay,
important.
so
than-
very quickly, in
Okay,
the
sure.
Korean War, China plays a major role for only one reason, because Mao wants to elevate his status in the world communist movement. So 400,000 Chinese, quote, volunteers die just so that Mao then can say, I helped liberate North Korea. But
400,000?
what?
400,000?
Yes.
And the U.S. was not allowed to use a nuke. So this is conventional weapons. 400,000 people died.
400,000 people die. I need to double check it because now it sounds in my head, even for Mao standards, like, wait, that many? I might
Yep.
be I might be wrong with this, but I will double check it. And also, this is when anti-Americanism becomes very prominent in China, because they spread these rumors that the Americans are bombarding us with poisoned spiders and poisoned snakes.
Really?
Yes. So imagine the COVID paranoia. So there were two paranoias. Number one, the Americans will nuke us. And the second was that the Americans are bombarding us. This is why you have these campaigns, if you heard about these campaigns against sparrows, against birds. All these things start from this paranoia that the Americans are using this bio warfare. By the way, if the Korea War had millions of, I think like 2 million deaths, it makes sense that 400,000 of them are Chinese. You can ask AI to see if we got.
ChatGPT says that American and UN estimates some claim around 400,000 Chinese deaths.
Oh, good.
According to China, it's more like 200,000 deaths.
Okay, so 200,000 to 400,000 deaths for the glory of Mao, so that at the end of the war, the line between North and South Korea was exactly where it was at the beginning of the war. So, great leap forward.
Yep, let's go for it.
So remember, by the time the Great Leap Forward starts, which is in the late 50s, land is already collectivized. So the only reason why Mao wants to go further than that is that, yes, the land is collectivized, but your life is not collectivized enough. So Mao has this idea to leap to full communism. And that's how he comes up with the Great Leap Forward. This means that whole communities would become now communes, which means people would work together, people would eat together, people would live together. So your house would be quite often destroyed and you would live in barracks situations. And you would all produce based on quotas and based on things that are controlled 100% by the state. So the revolution has already nationalized the land. Now it was time to nationalize every part of life. And this led to one of the worst, to the worst famine in human history. And here's a simple way to explain how the famine happened. Think about it this way. The central planner says that, let's say, Yaron's commune has to produce 5 tons of grain. Your commune actually produces 3 tons of grain, but you're scared to admit it, so you report 4. Now, the central planner says, okay, you produce 4, so you give me 3, and you keep 1. But you lied, so now you end up with 0 grain, but it gets worse. Next year, the party thinks that your baseline is 4 tons. Now you are expected to produce 5. You already have 1 year of famine on your back. Obviously, now you cannot even produce 2. And this is how it goes year after year. And as if this was not tragic enough, add to this. Obviously, the malfunction of a centrally planned economy. So even in good circumstances, centrally planned economy doesn't work. Add to this the persecution of the most able producers in the earlier stages of the revolution. Add to this that Mao thought that Marxism-Leninism is a science that can explain even agriculture. So he goes to a Marxist-Leninist agriculturalist, a guy called Lysenko from Soviet Union, who had this idea that in the same way that humans can cooperate, crops can cooperate. So you have destroyed cropses in a massive scale. Add to this a chaotic transportation system. Think of the soybeans disasters in part 3 of Atlas Shrugged. And you put all this together and you have all the ingredients for a disaster of biblical proportions.
Wasn't there also a dimension where he's trying to industrialize.
Oh, yeah, that's the other thing. Yeah. So he says, look, why have this division and this contradiction between rural and urban? We're going to have our agriculture and our industrial development will happen together. So every commune will also have a, how do you call these things where you,
A furnace,
foundry,
a furnace, a
a
foundry.
furnace, sorry, a furnace,
Furnace.
yes, a furnace.
Yeah.
Every commune will have a furnace. And to build this furnace, everything you have, spoons, utensils, you throw them in the furnace. Because you don't need them, because now everything is communal. So add more disaster there. This was a waste of resources. Of
So
course,
this is the idea that you're gonna make steel, and you're gonna make steel products at every little village with the contents that they have in the village somehow. There's no iron ore, there's no mining going on.
so you will be a farmer, but you will also be making steel, because why
Yes.
not?
Yeah.
And the next step would be, and you will be a surgeon. So if someone needs a surgery, the farmer is a steel producer, everything. If you want it enough, and if you are armed with Marxist-Leninism, everything is possible.
Now this is more, I mean, this is crazier than anything they did in the Soviet Union, is that right?
In Soviet Union, they collectivized the land and it cost them 5 million people, but it was not that crazy, indeed. It was not that crazy.
And it was primarily Ukraine?
No, it was in Ukraine, based on the local circumstances, you had the majority of victims, but it was not targeted at Ukraine. So we have it in our mind as the Holodomor in Ukraine, but it had a lot of victims also outside Ukraine. So it wasn't targeted to destroy Ukrainians. I know there are many Ukrainians today who disagree, but I haven't seen any particular evidence that it was that Stalin wanted to destroy the Ukrainians. It just happened that these were the lands that were mostly affected. This doesn't take anything away from the criminality. I'm just
Sure.
saying.
So what was the extent of the deaths under Mao? Do we even know? I mean, because I know the numbers are, they're conflicting numbers.
Yes. So Frank Dicotter, who, in my view, he's the best scholar, he has a whole chapter. So Dicotter has his trilogy, which has now become 5 books. On the book on the Great Famine, he has a whole chapter with the methodology, and he comes up with a number who he claims is 40 to 45 million, and he's not on the upper side. There are people who claim it might have been even more.
Yep.
The smaller number that you can find around from serious scholars is 25 to 30 million. So 25 to 30 million is the minimum. Probably it's around 45 million again. And every new research raises the number. More, because remember, we're talking about a country which today has still the same regime. So we haven't got access to the full data from all the provinces.
Yep.
Now, here's what makes this even worse. Of these 45 million people, not all of them died because of a bad harvest. Something like 6 to 8% of them died from violent and gruesome deaths. Because when you don't reach the target, someone is to blame. Someone is a saboteur. So you have the usual stuff. Torture people to death, lynch people, bury people alive, all these things continue. Trigger warning again. We have cannibalism. We have parents selling their kids.
Because they're hungry. Yeah.
Because they're hungry. And the worst thing that, again, major trigger warning, we have families exchanging dead children so that they would eat each other's children, so that, cannibalism wouldn't be, you wouldn't eat your own children. Now, I know you could say, take this with a pinch of salt. It's very difficult to read any history of the Great Leap Forward without finding stories about cannibalism. And again, why don't we hear more about this? For the simple reason that the party that was responsible for all this is the party that is still in power in China.
And they still, they still make the claim that Mao was the great leader who created modern China. So the Chinese Communist Party still venerates Mao Zedong. They have not. It's not like towards the end the communists in Russia kind of figured out Stalin was a bad guy. The communists in China pretend that Mao was the great man that he presented himself to be, and that they're not ready to face their own history.
Yet, when you lose tens of millions of people, it becomes difficult to hide. So, in the early 60s, Mao is under a lot of pressure because all the big names, let's say, of the party, they get the reports. They don't know how many millions of people have died, but they know that tens of millions of people have died. And they start exerting pressure to Mao. So Mao now needs a leap forward to leave behind the tragedy of the Great Leap Forward. And what he does is he starts traveling the country and going straight, not to the party mechanism, because he was suspicious that the party mechanism, these guys are going to lynch me. He goes straight to kids. He goes straight to what we would know as the Red Guards. And he tells them, you are the future, the party is corrupt, now it is time to take the revolution in your hands. So in 1966, the party newspaper starts a campaign against specialists, scholars, and authorities, which means against anyone who was in a position of power or in a position to get a functioning, semi-functioning society running.
Yep.
And this is the beginning of what would become known as the Great Cultural Revolution, which was one of the most of the greatest example of mass hysteria that the modern world has ever existed.
So this is not so much a top-down revolution as it was unleashing these young people.
Yes. Think about it this way. Imagine if Trump would go to a school in Texas that has been trained throughout their life only in MAGA thought and tell the kids, you have the green light now to go and destroy your teachers. Except that, imagine if Trump was 1,000 times more powerful than the actual Trump. This is what the kids would experience. Mao himself would welcome them in Beijing and unleash them to go and destroy the order of the day. So this was a very, again, anarchistic violence. You've probably seen the scenes where they lynch their professors, they put these signs on them, they put them stay in this position. But it wasn't always this ritualized. Quite often there were lynchings that would lead to death. Everyone would come up with their own torture methods. Again, imagine the bully in the school having actually the obligation to humiliate the teacher.
And I mean, party members were not spared. That is, the kids got to decide who to go after. So, for example, Deng Xiaoping's son was thrown out of a three-story building or something and became paralyzed for life. And this is Deng, who was at the time like Mao, in Mao's inner circle. During the Cultural Revolution, he gets sent to the countryside to get re-educated. But at the beginning, he's still part of Mao's inner circle, and his kid is thrown out of the window, right? So these young people are unleashed and given carte blanche in terms of who they attack and what means of violence they use.
It's difficult to even conceive it in a Western standard. So that's why think of the hysteria that we experienced in the summer of 2020. But again, imagine telling these mobs, you have the freedom to go after every single person who has ever said something problematic. So what happened is the students would go back and try to find in archives or in old articles and books. So, for example, if someone would praise, let's say, something of Western science, now you are suspicious of following the old ways.
Have you read The Three Body Problem?
I've seen the opening scene, and the opening scene is quite.
The opening scene in the Netflix version, there's a Chinese version of the book. That scene doesn't appear in the Chinese. There's a Chinese version of a TV series made in China of The Three Body Problem, and that scene is not there. But then the Netflix version, it is there, and it's incredibly powerful. So in the scene, they've got a physics professor, right? And they accuse him of advocating for modern physics, like quantum theory or something like that. And then they beat him to death on stage with thousands of students cheering and his daughter in the audience watching all this.
Well, there are days when you have tens of lynchings per day in Beijing. The other thing that you mentioned that scene where the daughter is experiencing the humiliation of the parents. You have other cases where the kids are actually running the struggle sessions against their parents. I read a story in the Black Book of Communism, the chapter on China, where a kid goes to a concentration camp, humiliates the already humiliated father there, and the father is so broken that he cries, and normally the wardens would not allow the inmates to cry, but in that case, even the warden realized what a horrible thing was happening, so he did not punish the father for crying. So we're talking again about this level of depth of human depravity. And then, as this was reached the levels of anarchy, Mao had to make sure that the situation is somehow kept at bay. So then what happens is he releases the army against the Red Guards, because the Red Guards became
because of the students.
The students. But this was an army that already from 1965, they were stripped from all insignia, from all uniform. So what would happen is an army would go, let's say, in Indiana, if this is the United States. But another army unit is also in Indiana. And the one unit says, we are here from President Mao. The other says, no, you are a revisionist. And they would shoot it out because you couldn't say who is superior, who is inferior. Remember again in part 3 of Atlas Shrugged, where you have every wannabe thug and every wannabe warlord trying to grasp whatever they could grasp. The only good thing that came out of all this. Oh, and then Mao said that, look, you've all gone too far. Therefore, now your punishment will be that you have to go to the countryside. And urban kids were sent to the countryside to become farmers and to experience a better consciousness through labor.
So yes, anybody, all the professors at the universities were basically emptied out.
The schools were closed. There were no classes for months.
So all the professors who survived, their students, were now sent to the countryside. Deng Xiaoping and much of the communist leadership was sent to the countryside. Basically, anybody with any kind of intellectual degree, anybody who with any kind of leadership position, sent to the countryside for re-education with their families, no food. Again, people are starving in the countryside still. The Great Leap Forward is over. It's not like there's lots of food out there. The farms are still collectivized, so they're still struggling. And suddenly you have all these city folk show up in these villages and become a burden on them. I think, what's his name? Xi's father, the current premier current dictator of China. Xi's father was sent and lived in a cave for 2 years or something. I can't remember the exact details. But Xi's father was part of the Cultural Revolution and sent out to the countryside. So it reminds, again, a little bit of Pol Pot, right? The idea of empty the cities. It wasn't quite emptying the cities, but at least emptying the cities of leaders and intellectuals and people like that.
And people shouldn't assume that if you were not a professor, you were okay.
Yep.
Because what would happen is the Red Guards would enter your house. And they would say, for example, why are you listening to jazz? There is in one of the books, I don't remember where, someone was having, so the scared landlady offered the Red Guards coffee. And the leader of the Red Guards, coffee? Coffee is not, why do you have imperialist remnant? Or again, horrible stuff. What Frank Decoder calls the Great Massacre of Cats. The Red Guards would kill cats, even kittens, in front of their owners because they consider that the cat is an unforgivable bourgeois decadence. Like, why do you need a cat? You are taking care of the cat, whereas you could be volunteering for the revolution. Like, again, who does that? This is the type of bestialization of existence, and this, for many Western intellectuals, the Cultural Revolution was the pinnacle of the best thing that happened, the most revolutionary thing that happened since maybe the Russian Revolution.
So let's talk a little bit about the Western intellectuals and how they respond to Mao, and how they've responded to Mao, since then.
Okay. Louis Althusser is perhaps the most famous structural Marxist, still celebrated, still taught in sociology. He wrote a little pamphlet for the Cultural Revolution, and he celebrates it, and his final words are, the lessons of the Cultural Revolutions belong to all of us, and we should make the Cultural Revolution, like, we should own it. Alain Badiou, celebrated till today. He wrote a book, The Communist Hypothesis. It has a chapter on the Cultural Revolution. He considers it one of the 3 moments in history where we almost reached communism. Slavoj Žižek.
Almost.
Yeah. Slavoj Žižek, intellectual superstar today. I'll just read one sentence. The Cultural Revolution survives its defeat in socio-historical reality. It continues to lead an underground spectral life of the ghosts of failed utopias, which haunt the future generations, patiently awaiting their next resurrection. So we almost got it, but it still lives as a ghost, and it's going to come back. So, and this makes you think, what are these people after? If they found so inspiring, they say, yeah, maybe there were some excesses, but if they found this so inspiring, what are their people after? Yeah. What is they want to achieve? What is their goal?
Destruction. There's a nihilism there. There's a clear nihilism there.
And again, these are people who are celebrated. I'll just give one last example. In one of the universities I worked, there was an old professor. At that point, he was like emeritus, honorable professor. Everyone knew, and he was talking about it. He went as a volunteer to China just around the Cultural Revolution to work in the farms. And it was kind of this badge of honor. And imagine, for me, that's the equivalent of someone going and serving in the SS volunteer divisions in Stalingrad, and then coming back and say, I fought in Stalingrad with the Blue Division. Which, by the way, he was a very boring and uninspiring guy. So it's like, that's the banality of evil. You'd expect that, you'd meet an interesting person. Because I took seminars from this guy on Marxism. It was completely the banality of evil. Anyway.
Did Mao ever appeal to you?
Not particularly. So, interestingly, Mao was never part of the canon of Soviet-leaning Marxism-Leninism. Mao was always seen as an embarrassment. It was because also, we didn't mention this, he was at open conflict with Soviet Union after Stalin's death. So actually, at some point, Brezhnev is appealing to the Americans and is telling them, we need to secretly unite because we are Westerners, and these Asian despotic brutes, what are they doing there? Actually, the Soviets are trying to persuade the Americans, look, if you drop a nuclear bomb to China, we don't have a problem. You have a free hand to do so.
But what's interesting, though, is is what actually happens is that Nixon believes that an alliance with Mao serves his purpose to confront the Soviet Union. That is, he flips it on Brezhnev and he goes to Mao and is trying to establish an alliance with Mao as a front against Russian communism.
And
against
I'm
the Soviets.
told by prominent conservatives that this is because Kissinger was such a genius.
Yeah.
The biggest genius in the history of
Yeah, we should do a show on Kissinger someday. Yeah.
Anyway, so 1976, Mao dies.
So when does the Cultural Revolution end? Because it by the time he dies, it's kind of over, and these people have come. Many of them have come back from the wilderness.
Yes.
And things are falling apart. It seems like things are falling apart around him when he dies.
But that's the good thing. The one good thing that happened through the Cultural Revolution is the Cultural Revolution destroyed the Communist Party, particularly in the countryside.
Yep.
So people were able to produce again, produce outside the cycles of the party, and something like a spontaneous order rose. So if we ever make an episode for what happens in China after Mao, most people would say, oh, this was a triumph because the regime liberalized. What actually happened is there was a gap, there was a void. And within that void, you had spontaneous markets. And then Deng Xiaoping, he realized, okay, the genie is out of the bottle, but hey, this thing works.
Yeah.
So let's not intervene with it too much. It wasn't that it was a special plan by Deng Xiaoping that I'm going to liberalize.
No, so Deng basically comes back from the Cultural Revolution skeptical about the communism as practiced by Mao, without an ideology. He has no ideology, but he basically becomes a pragmatist. He says, well, whatever we've done up until now doesn't work. The only result has been death and starvation. We need something else. And he actually, in around 78, he goes to visit Japan, and he is stunned because, these people don't know how rich the West is at this point, right? They don't have televisions. They don't travel. The Chinese don't travel. They don't know what's going on in the rest of the world. So he goes to Japan and he's blown away by it. So he says, okay, we need some of that. I don't know how to get it, but I'm not going to clamp down on people who seem to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, there's a famous Chinese village, which was the model for this gap that you talk about, where they have the contract and the authorities discover it, they almost kill them all. And Deng says, no, it worked. Let's try it in another village and see what happens. So
right.
So Mao dies in 76.
76.
There's a power vacuum.
Then there's some struggle for power. The gang of
three,
how many?
I think. Ultimately, it's three.
Ultimately, three. His wife and two more, they're set aside. The guy who was supposed to be the heir of Mao is purged during the Cultural Revolution. So out of this, let's say, void, how to put it, then you have Deng Xiaoping, and then later you have the reforms in the 80s, but that's a different thing. So last word, why is Mao still today appreciated by the regime and is not seen as a liability? Because he's seen as, first and foremost, a nationalist leader, as the guy who used Marxist-Leninism as a vehicle for Chinese grandeur, for Chinese nationalism. And what was the grandeur? That he kicked out all foreign influences.
And he united the country. China always has this tendency to break apart to warlords, and he established one central government.
He established one central government. Of course, this had already happened with Chiang Kai-shek, but don't tell them. But also he ended the century of humiliation. So what does Marxist-Leninism mean for the Chinese bureaucrat today? It means a tool of anti-imperialism, which means a tool to keep at bay, to keep away the Westerners and the Americans. This is why today Mao and something which is so-called Marxist-Leninism is relevant in China.
Yes, it's not the economic theories or the political even theories, it's more the anti-imperialism and the unification that they value.
Exactly.
Do you know anything about how they got the atomic bomb?
Yes, with help from early on, with help from Soviet Union. I think they get it in is it 57?
They get the bomb in 60. I think it's 62.
Right, but
64. First detonated, first atomic bomb is in 64, and the Soviets helped them until the late 50s.
yeah, because
when
then they have the
when
split.
they have the break. They have the break.
Here's an interesting thing to understand what type of man Mao was. When Khrushchev sees he's a witness of the hydrogen bomb, he freaks out. He has an existential crisis. And this is one of the reasons why Khrushchev makes it a mission in his mind. We should never, ever have a nuclear war. When Mao sees the first nuclear test, he's so excited that he writes a poem. And he's trying to persuade the Soviets, we need to change our nuclear doctrine. We should not be afraid of a nuclear confrontation with the West because there are more of us. They have a finite amount of nuclear bombs. Even if they drop all of them, some of us will survive. And because of the laws of history, socialism will prevail. So this is the type of man Mao was.
He did not care one iota for human life.
Not one iota.
Yeah.
Of course, the nuclear bombs that the Chinese back then had, they were completely crap. They didn't have delivery systems, but
yeah, I mean, ultimately they developed those, but yes, it was all pretty primitive originally.
yeah.
All right. Anything else? Anything else we've missed? Haven't
No,
covered?
I think that was all for Mao. So the parting thoughts: the closest China tried to get to communism, to egalitarianism, and to overcoming individualism, that was the time when there were the highest piles of corpses. And we saw exactly the same in Soviet Union. The highest piles of corpses at the time when they tried to reach real socialism through the collectivization, and in China, real communism with the Great Leap Forward.
Yep. So the idea that the closer you get to communism, the more death and destruction you get,
exactly.
holds once we examine these histories more closely.
And we have the proof that communists themselves tell us that the Cultural Revolution was the closest thing to communism. Now, the Cultural Revolution didn't bring that many victims. We're talking probably 500,000 to 800,000. I mean, it's still a lot, but it was the period of the worst excesses of anarchistic terror. And again, this is what these people are after, and they are telling us.
Yep. All right. We will turn to your super chat questions now. What are we doing next week?
Patrick Deneen.
So next week, we're going to talk about Patrick Deneen, one of the post-liberals, one of the leaders of the post-liberal movement, and a friend and a huge influence on J.D. Vance. Yeah, I mean, he's a integralist, Catholic, all the good stuff. Whoops, what happened? Your video went away there for a minute. You're back. So we will be talking about Patrick Deneen next time. I just asked ChatGPT about how many people died in the Cultural Revolution. So not to contradict Nikos, but ChatGPT says the best supported scholarly estimate is about 1 to 2 million.
What?
With roughly 1.5 million, a reasonable central figure. ChatGPT is pretty moderate when criticizing communism. So this sociologist Andrew Walder reconstruction from more than 2,200 Chinese local histories estimates 1.1 to 1.6.
So you see, it's very interesting that, as I told you, the more modern the resource, the higher the number.
Yep.
My sources said something like 800,000, and yeah.
Yep.
Anyway, but this then would bring, if we take China as, let's say, having overall, let's say, 55 million deaths, this means that the overall victims of communism are above 75 million people. So we're talking about the most lethal movement in the history of humanity.
So you're fairly conservative on the numbers for the Soviet Union.
Yeah,
Because I've heard much bigger numbers on the Soviet Union.
Yeah, I'm not buying them. I'm not buying them.
All right. Because I've heard the total is over 100
Well,
million.
think about this way. Okay, civil war, let's say 3 million. First famine, 4 million. Collectivization, 5 million. Great terror, 1 million. 1 million here and there from deportations and stuff.
God.
You cannot, like, how can you go north of that? What else would you include there?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think I've seen estimates on the famines that are much higher, but I'm not an expert. I have no idea. And we should know about the Soviets because those archives have been opened, and so modern historians should have a pretty good estimate on those numbers.
The thing is, even the Soviets themselves sometimes didn't have good estimates back then.
Okay. All right. Let's take a look at our questions. I'm looking at, they're all over the place. I'm just looking quickly to see if we have some Mao questions before we get to the rest of them. All right. So I'm not going by the total dollars. I'm going by all right. We'll
Yes,
do
be a
this.
bit extra generous today, people, because again, my YouTube was demonetized. So at least for a month, I cannot expect anything.
A month you're demonetized because of the pets?
I don't know if it's because the pets. It happened after that.
They don't explain.
It's still unclear to me why it happened. But people can check. They cannot send me super thanks.
Yep. Wow. All right. Ryan says, thank you for choosing this topic. My suggestion from last week. So thank you, Ryan, for suggesting this.
Ryan.
This is good. Was excited you chose it. I owe you more than my $10 super chat from last week. If you haven't already, can you do brief Taiwan founding explanation and future outlook for Taiwan?
That should be you.
In terms of future, I can say something, but founding of Taiwan, I think Chiang Kai-shek crosses the strait with, I can't remember how many people, but his followers and the people committed to it, and basically establishes a dictatorship in Taiwan. He becomes the authoritarian leader. Taiwan doesn't become successful economically until probably until the 1970s, towards the end of Czech's rule, and what really Taiwan flourishes once Chiang Kai-shek is gone, and it adopts kind of free market economics under kind of a more liberal political system. And Taiwan is one of the real miracles out there in the world in terms of wealth and innovation and entrepreneurship. It is just an amazing place. In terms of the future, look, the future is bleak in this sense. It definitely appears that the United States of America is backing away from the world. No matter who the next president is, I don't think they're going to be particularly interested in going to fight a war in the Pacific to defend Taiwan. No matter who the president in the future is, my sense is that Dugin's a guy we should probably do a show on sometimes, but Dugin's vision of a multipolar world is probably going to become a reality. Maybe not multipolar, because it might not include Russia, because I'm not sure Russia will survive. But China and the United States will divvy up the world. I think most Americans, both on the left and right now, have basically come to that conclusion. Certainly J.D. Vance has. He talks about a multipolar world all the time, and and I've just been seeing videos this week of him calling for the dollar to stop being the kind of the global currency. He wants the world to stop using dollars. He believes it's a subsidy we're providing the rest of the world, which is bizarre. But so I think Taiwan cannot rely on the United States to protect it. Japan and South Korea have an interest in protecting Taiwan, a much more direct interest than the U.S. is. But would they be willing to risk war with China to do it? Would they be willing to risk actual attacks on Japan and South Korea for it? I doubt it. Particularly given the extent to which the civilian population in both countries is concentrated in the cities. A bombardment of those cities would be devastating. This is the whole thing about North Korea, South Korea. Seoul, the city of Seoul, is within artillery distance from the border with North Korea. Simple artillery. You don't need missiles. You don't need ballistic missiles. And you can't do anything with artillery shells. I mean, it's almost impossible. They need to have an Israeli Iron Dome on steroids in order to protect themselves. And I'm not sure Israel sold them one or that they've asked Israel for one. Anyway, I just don't see how Taiwan can fight back, and it would be very costly for China to take Taiwan. But the Taiwanese don't seem that passionate about fighting. That is, they still don't spend a lot of money on defense. Young people in Taiwan, it's not like they're motivated to go to the army to defend their island. They don't seem to be motivated at all. They think they're going to just cruise and survive with. So, they're buying advanced weapon systems, but they're not spending the kind of money they would need to really defend themselves against against China. So I'm not very optimistic about it. China's not ready. China's still too weak. Its military is not strong enough. So I think it's going to take some time. But unless there's change inside China, which is possible, I guess, but they've only had one election in their entire history, and that was in 1913, in their entire history. So China's not exactly got a tradition of or a history of. And who are they going to be inspired by? American federalism? I mean, who exactly is going to inspire this revolution in China? So it's hard to be optimistic about the future of Taiwan.
The only not optimistic, but something to keep in mind. In almost every decade in the existence of People's Republic of China, they claim they're about to take Taiwan. Mao at some point is ready to have a force to take Taiwan. Deng Xiaoping also says Taiwan is ours, we're coming, and they've never done it. Of course, back then, significantly weaker naval capabilities, but I'm just putting it out there.
And I'll just say, somebody mentions on the chat that they have conscription in Taiwan. They do. But as far as I remember, it's much shorter than Israel. Israel, it's 3 years for men, 2 years for women. In Taiwan, I think it's shorter. You don't get a sense, which is shocking to me, you don't get a sense for the Taiwanese of urgency about having to defend themselves. It's either because they expect the United States to come to protect them, which is they should wake up and realize that there's a high probability that doesn't happen, or they don't believe the Chinese will ever do it. But it doesn't seem to be a sense of urgency among the Taiwanese population. And maybe somebody knows more about. I know some listener to the show was lived in Taiwan for a while, but I can't remember who. All right. Who is this?
Also, remember, we might want to leave it for next week, but you also have to do the review of Troy that someone paid last week for.
That's right.
But right. We can do it on the same day with the episode on Mike Menzer if we worry that the episode is going to be a short one.
Okay, so so we're going to delay the Troy a little bit. We both watched it. We have stuff to say about it, but we're going long today. There are lots of questions. Okay. So let's delay that a little bit. All right. I like Ike says, Nikos, your video on pets was powerful. Thank you for your work. Yaron, please do more Ben Jordan style videos Thank you for all you do. Who are some other actors you like in which roles in the future Atlas Shrugged movie? I don't play this game. I don't remember actors' names or faces, particularly modern actors. So I have no views on this one.
We've played this on Twitter. I told you, ideally, the guy who. Anyway, again, I don't know new actors, but thank you for the comment. However, it was my worst performing video ever in the modern time, and it got me demonetized, but it was still worth it.
All right. Andrew says, Mao glorified physical labor while degenerating intellectual work. So do many conservatives. Their attitude towards manufacturing over service industry. Do conservatives hold the same Marxist materialism as communists?
Well, next week when we're going to talk about Lenin, you will see that he directly quotes Marx. He's directly influenced by Marx. And it's this, again, cult of we are doing things. We are producing stuff. Now, it makes sense if you talk about super sensitive stuff that would be useful in a war effort. But notice that they do not isolate their will to bring every manufacturing job back to the US only on sensitive areas. I don't know if I don't think it's a Marxist thing, but I don't know, maybe you can guess more why they're doing this.
I mean, I don't think it's a Marxist thing because, I mean, some of the biggest critics of capitalism in the 19th century were conservatives, particularly conservatives in Germany. I don't think that would surprise anybody. I mean, because what did they cry about? What were they complaining about? They were complaining about the loss of community, people moving away from their churches, the secularization of society that's associated with cities and wealth, right? People becoming wealthy, the loss of small villages and communities and communitarianism, all of that they lost. And then there's something. The Christians, even more than Marx. Marx venerated physical labor in factories. These Christian conservatives venerated physical labor in farming, and you can see that even today. Oh, we need to protect the small farms. America's a farming country, and they go on and on about farms as if there's something mystically beautiful about this. Much more like Mao than like Marx. But there's something, if you believe that it's good to go back to 1220, as Michael Knowles has mentioned, or if you believe that feudalism is an ideal, like Tucker Carlson has mentioned, then what is it about those societies that was beautiful? Well, the connection with the land, and of course religion. And they associate intellectual work with secularism, with reason, which is anti-faith. So it's not so much that they're materialists, is that they're anti-reason. They're fundamentally anti-reason. And whereas Marx, reason is irrelevant because it's completely historical determinism, with Christianity, there's a determinism there, but reason is the enemy. Reason is the source of individualism. Reason is the source of secularism. Reason is an alternative means of achieving the truth to faith. So their attack on modern society is all an attack on reason. That is what motivates it. And we'll see that in Lenin. There's a real suspicion of reason in Lenin.
By the way, you're going to get 3 book reviews next week, people. You're going to get Why Liberalism Fails, you're going to get Regime Change, and you're going to get American Odyssey.
All right, Wes, $50. Thank you, Wes.
Thank you.
Was Mao an intellectual? I'm getting the impression his belief in communism is more akin to religion than other communist leaders. If that makes any sense, is that right?
So Mao, till he's at least 40, hasn't properly read Marxism. When he's young, he reads Russell, and that's all he knows from related to philosophy. When he's in the mountains, that's when he reads Marxism, Leninism. and he immediately gives seminars on Marxism-Leninism, which is the equivalent. Imagine I study Objectivism. I'm in some mountains, in tribal mountains in Crete. I give the seminars to shepherds. They've never heard Objectivism in their life, but because I've read Gold's speech, I can give seminars to Atlas Shrugged. This is how Mao became an authority in Marxism-Leninism. He wrote a book on contradictions, which his acolytes claim it is a very good Marxist thought. I found it simplistic and not. Zizek likes it, so maybe this tells you all you need to know. But no, I don't think he was a serious intellectual.
Say something about the Red Book. What is the Red Book?
Oh, the Red Book has just quotes. Quotes, I'll just read one random one. Okay, we have to be humble and we have to be good people. We have to protect ourselves from being too selfish and to hurry too much. We have to serve Chinese people with all our heart. I just opened a random page. This is the type of stuff that you get here.
Yeah.
There was one area, though, where Mao was, again, he left a mark in history. And I think this was his integrating guerrilla strategy to a wider political goal. So in that area, I think he was a top percentile, like a 95th percentile figure in history, but only in that. Not so much in the tactics of guerrilla war, but integrating guerrilla warfare to an overall goal, political goal.
All right. Remind me, I need to thank the sticker people, so we'll get to that in a minute.
Sure.
Frank says, thanks for all your production. Could Mao's version be regarded as Trotskyite, as perpetual revolution, rather than the bureaucracy version of Stalin?
Okay, that's an excellent question. The first book I ever read about Mao was a book that my mother had gotten, translated straight from Soviet Science Institute, with the title Trotskyism, Maoist, Anarchist. So for Orthodox Marxists, Trotskyists and Maoists were part of the same gang. Actually, no. Mao is focusing on the peasantry, and that's his main contribution to Marxism. Whereas with Trotsky, I don't think because Trotsky is more Eurocentric, he didn't have to deal with these questions that Mao had to deal with. But
what about this idea of perpetual revolution?
Well, perpetual revolution doesn't mean anything specific. It was a slogan that Trotsky had. You could say Stalin also did perpetual revolution. He did the collectivization, then the Great Terror. Yes, Mao did perpetual revolution in a way that every time there was a new wave of terror and horror, because he wanted to shake things up. And by the way, why did he want to shake things up? Because he said, you resolve contradictions through action, and he meant through violence. So when the situation is not good, shake things up, and somehow contradictions will reveal and resolve themselves. It's what Yaron said earlier. All this is mysticism. We can try to dress it with theories. This is just thugginess and mysticism.
All right.
And if anyone has a doubt, try reading his work on contradictions.
Thanks, Frank. That was $100. Really appreciate that. Svika for $100. What would be a proper U.S. foreign policy towards China nowadays?
I don't know enough, so I will leave this. I will leave this to you.
So, I mean, it's really difficult to say we should have a proper foreign policy towards China in a vacuum where we don't have a proper foreign policy towards everybody. So that's point one. So imagine a situation where the United States has just crushed Iran, devastating it. In 10 days, the regime is gone, and we've installed a democratically elected new regime in Iran. That is a massive foreign policy achievement vis-a-vis China. That is, now China looks back and says, oh, America's kind of serious, and they can actually win a war. we need to step back a little bit. We need to be careful here. It's almost impossible to say we're going to have a foreign policy, a tough foreign policy towards China, when we're so pathetically weak everywhere else. Or imagine if the United States had gone all in on helping Ukraine beat Russia, right? And defend itself against Russia, or and gone all in and crushing Iran. Then China becomes a small threat. It's not significant. What makes China a threat right now is that we are so weak, and it is so emboldened by the fact that we are weak. So I think China today is a much bigger threat to America than it was 6 months ago, because of how pathetic Trump has executed on the war with Iran, and the fact that munitions are so low. I mean, this is an ideal time for them to invade Taiwan if they're going to anything. So that's point one. So imagine a world in which we're tough. We've just destroyed Iran. I mean, destroyed the regime, replaced the regime in Iran. We're fully backing Ukraine. We're producing weapons at scale because we're unleashing American entrepreneurs on this. And then we turn to China and say, look, I mean, this is what I believe we should do. Look, we will do everything in our power, including sending in our ships and our military, to stop you from taking over Taiwan. We don't want a war with you, and we don't want hostilities with you, but we will do that. Other than that, have a good day. Have nothing to do with China. That is, get rid of all this stupidity about tariffs. Let the Chinese do whatever the hell they want in terms of trade. The United States shouldn't have any tariffs on them. But basically, diplomatically distance ourselves from the Chinese. I mean, certainly Xi should not be visiting Washington, D.C. Certainly an American president shouldn't be in Beijing. And say, we don't like you. We don't like your regime. We think authoritarianism is evil, but we're not at war with you. We don't want a war with you. And we're gonna basically leave you alone. Maybe restrict sales of hypersensitive technology to China, although I don't think it really helps that much, because that stuff's smuggled in anyway. But short of that, that's it. And you as an individual can choose whether you want to buy Chinese goods or not. But the government has no business in dictating trade with China. And as long as China is not at war with the United States or the threat of a war with the United States, there's no reason to, boycott them or go to war with them. So that would be my view. It would be arm's length, ignore them, but make it clear that what your position on Taiwan is, and that they can't touch Taiwan. And I think right now, given TSMC, Taiwan is a massive strategic interest of the United States. So is Japan, and so is South Korea. And Chinese expansion in that direction. If they want to go to war with Vietnam, who cares? For that matter, if they want to go to war with India, who cares? But if they go to war with South Korea, Japan, or Taiwan, that is a vital American interest, and America should not tolerate that. That would be my view. You look skeptical.
No. I was listening very carefully. I was just thinking that China has already gone to war at least twice with communist countries. They had border skirmishes with Soviet Union.
Yep.
And a war with Vietnam.
Yep. In 78, 79, something like that.
When the regime fell in Cambodia.
Yep.
Late 70s, yes.
Yes, I think it was under Deng. Deng took them to war with China, with Vietnam. And they did okay, but it's not like Vietnam is a modern, powerful.
That's the thing with China. Last time China was properly tested in a war was the Korea War,
yes.
Which, by the way, it's such a fascinating story. We should at some point cover it.
Yeah.
Imagine that morning, your American troopers suddenly 200,000 Chinese come out of nowhere.
Yep.
How can 200,000 people come out of nowhere? It's the biggest surprise upset in a war. It was a nightmare scenario. It was a horror movie, like minus 30 degrees, and here come 200,000 Chinese.
Yeah, and so China is not tested. Its weapon systems have never been tested. It has lots of claims about the abilities of their planes and missiles and air defense systems. None of that has been tested. The United States has been tested. We know what the U.S. is capable of doing when it's unleashed. But you know, it is never. The United States hasn't won a war since World War II. So you have to. The fact that they have superior weapons and superior strategy and all this, they still can't win a war. And why they can't win a war, that's for another show. But America cannot win a war. Thanks, Trika. Really appreciate the support. Let's see. We got that.
Wait, Zvika, that's an Israeli name, right?
Zvika is definitely an Israeli.
I know a quote. It's Zvika Cerf.
Yeah, he's my oldest friend. So we go back to days when we both lived in Israel. So yeah. All right. It looks like, let's see if on this side, if there are any questions about, Cook says, but the millions of people who died under Mao Zedong was an accident. Oopsie daisy.
Actually, I want to ask a question, Yaron, seriously. Sorry, does our friend have a question? Because he gave me an idea.
It's not a question. It's he's being,
yeah, but
sarcastic.
This gives me I want to ask you a question. Many people claim that Mao is not as bad as Hitler because Hitler killed all these people consciously. He drove the Jews to the gas chambers with the aim of killing them. Whereas Mao, he didn't actively want to kill them. They just died in the process. Do you think this makes any difference in the culpability of the two?
I mean, when you're dealing with people of that degree of evil, it's hard to rank them, right? I mean, it's particularly given that Mao is getting reports from the countryside. So it's not like they didn't know. And he wouldn't back down. He doubled up. He pushed it further. He kept doing more of it. And look, if the source of evil, according to Objectivism, the source of evil is evasion, then the degree of evasion that Mao engaged in is the same. Now, there is something unique about the Nazis, about the fact that they, of all the evil regimes that we know of, right, they're the ones that come out of the most civilized context. They're a Western European country. A Western European country that experienced the Enlightenment to some extent, at least. They're the land of Beethoven. They're the land of, the greatest musicians in human history. They're the land of philosophers. Now, it turns out really, really bad philosophers, and this is the cause. And then to turn the instruments of capitalism, in a sense, right? The industrialized base of Germany into a killing machine. So to do the killing in an industrialized fashion, right? There's something uniquely evil that puts Hitler and the Nazis above all of them. Even though the numbers are smaller, Hitler killed fewer people than Stalin and fewer people than Mao. There's something about the industrialization, the systematization, and the facts of where it's happening. This is Germany. It's not some godforsaken part of the world. Now, China has a long history of civilization, but Germany's history of civilization is modern. It's a few years before this happened. So there's something uniquely psychologically interesting about, and philosophically interesting about, the switch in Germany versus Russians. There's nothing there when Lenin arrives. There's nothing much in China when Mao takes over. He gets a bunch of primitive peasants all excited. But you're talking about Germany, an intellectual place, a place of philosophy. So the role of ideas in the evil is much more powerful. So there's something uniquely evil about the Nazis, yes.
Don't quote me on this. I'm just thinking out loud, and this is something I'm grappling with. there's also something more Western, modern in the ways of the killing. So even an SS officer would freak out with what, let's say, the Red Army would do to women, or what the Chinese would do, like roasting alive, burying alive. And they would say, oh, it's more civilized to kill 100,000 people in the gas chambers rather than kill 100 people in a brutal primitive
Yeah,
way.
but then look at the experiments that they were doing in Auschwitz. I mean, think about the what's his name, Mengele, the doctor, call him a doctor, is horrible. But what these people were doing, twin studies, operations without anesthesia, the most disgusting things in the world that one can imagine. These people doing in the name of science. In that sense, it was Western, right? Kind of Western, but they had no problem with the most horrific tortures. But,
and the Dear
they needed
Levanger
rationalization, which was science.
The Dear Levanger brigade did medieval brutal stuff as well, and it's not that they were denounced by any Nazis. So anyway, that discussion is, again, I'm just thinking out loud.
It's interesting.
Psychological, as you said.
Let's see. Michael says, are professors in China and Japan just as Marxist and loony as Western professors?
You've been there, so you'll know more.
No, my sense is no, certainly not Japan. I don't think they're Marxist. And I don't think they're woke. So no, I don't get a sense at all the Japanese are that way. I mean, we could ask our Japanese objectivist friends. But I've not gotten that impression at all from Japan. I mean, they're more mixed economy, conventional, middle of the road types than the kind of nihilism that you get. Although there must have been a nihilistic streak in Japan, because there were those Japanese terrorists. You remember?
Oh my God!
Who were brutal.
First of all, they were the executors in the massacre in the Tel Aviv airport. Am I right?
Yep.
Organized by North Korea.
Yeah.
People should go and check out two videos. The one should be about that student group that invited Yukio Mishima in a debate. Like, they were serious radicals, like they were putting fires in the university and stuff. And at some point, I'll find the video and post it somewhere. Find street fights between radical workers in the 70s and the authorities in Japan. It's proper battle formation. So there were very few radical Marxists, but the radicalism was, imagine Japanese militarism in a Marxist setting. So they were scary and really hardcore people. Yeah. They made some of the worst Marxist terrorists.
Yeah, so I don't know that much about the intellectual history in Japan and the state, but in current situation, again, my impression, it doesn't support that. In terms of China, I didn't get a sense there were many real Marxists. When I gave a talk on the morality of capitalism in Xi'an University in China, and the representative of the Communist Party at the university, a Marxist, was front row center at my talk, and they were super friendly, and it was had like 300 students. I mean, it was packed hall. There's video of this. You can find it on YouTube. I put up, in those days I couldn't film a whole lecture because you didn't have enough memory in the cards that you put in. So I filmed it in clips, or I uploaded it in clips. But it was, so I never got the impression that they're very Marxist in China at all. They believe that the Chinese nation has to be ruled by an authoritarian. They believe that the alternative is anarchy, it's chaos, it's breaking up into warlords. And they don't believe that they're not idealists. They don't believe in an ideal. They're not very philosophical. They they want to make sure that China stays an authoritarian nation and prospers at the same time. And this is why the combination of free markets to some extent and authoritarian rule, they really like that because they can control things, but every time it gets a little out of control, every time people are starting to demanding too much individualism or too much freedom, they can clamp down quickly like they did in Tiananmen Square, or like I think Xi has been doing for the last 10 years. All right. Michael also asked, when are you reviewing Troy? So I think we'll review Troy today. It's getting late. So I think we'll review Troy, not next week, but the week after that. We're probably going to do a show on Mike Mensa in 2 weeks. Mike Mensa, the objectivist buddy, weightlifter. And that would be a good time to do, I think, Troy.
And the other episode that our friend requested.
Yes, and the other episode, which Nikos has not yet found, where it's streaming. So we have to find where it's streaming and then watch that. But we both watched Troy. We were ready to do it today, but partially because of the technical issues and partially just because we had a lot to say, and there were a lot of questions. We'll do it in 2 weeks. All right. Let's see. Anything else here on?
I'm still butthurt that I got wrong the death toll of the Cultural Revolution. So now I'm trying very quickly to find what Decoder has to say about it. But
so I would check. I mean, this is ChatGPT, and he says the authority is a guy named Andrew Walder.
Okay, ask ChatGPT what does Decoder think about the Cultural Revolution. But when you ask another question,
what is his name?
What?
What's his name?
Frank Decoter with 2 T.
D-E?
D-I-K-O-T-T-E-R.
All right.
As people, you can understand, Yaron is a bit too bullish and too excited with AI. We have a third person in our relationship in this show.
Right.
It is
right.
ChatGPT.
ChatGPT. So ChatGPT is checking.
Good.
All right, let's see. We still got a lot of questions. We got $100 question here. Where was it? I saw it a minute ago. There it is. Michael, thank you, Michael, again. Egalitarianism and being passive, living off of welfare, don't seem to be a part of Asian culture. Despite the intellectuals, they are very hardworking, meritocratic people. Is this because they don't have Christianity? Egalitarianism can't resonate in non-Christian societies.
I have zero knowledge of these societies. I'll just say one thing. From my work on China, again, Mao invested on the lowest instincts of envy. And looks like there was demand for it. At the same time, after the Cultural Revolution, when the party infrastructure is destroyed, it's absolutely inspiring how quickly the Chinese people become entrepreneurial. So yeah. I have signs that from both sides that Chinese culture, and again, China is like the size of a continent. So I'm not, basically, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, in Chinese history, the Chinese were very hierarchical, right? There was and it was always a massive bureaucracy that ran things and that emphasized knowledge and exams and studying. On the other hand, so it wasn't egalitarian at all. That is, you could join the bureaucracy even if you weren't a part of the aristocracy. So this was very different than Europe. You could join the bureaucracy if you did well on the test. And so you could be a peasant boy, and if you were super smart, you could become part of the bureaucracy. So they valued ability. They valued skill. I don't know where the entrepreneurship comes from, but there certainly is. I mean, if you look at Confucius is not egalitarian. If you look at Taoism and some of the others, I forget, the guy who the libertarians claim invented libertarianism in China.
Lao Tzu.
Lao Tzu, clearly not an egalitarian. So Chinese philosophy doesn't have egalitarianism in it. What I think Mao leverages is the humiliation, the frustration, and the envy. And I really think there was envy because Chinese society, certainly in the 19th century, going into the 20th century, and really all the way back for 2,000 years, there were peasants and there were rich people. And yes, the peasants could become bureaucrats, and therefore some peasants could become bureaucrats and become richer. But that's a very small number, right? They would have to study, they would have to be educated. It's very rare for a peasant to be able to do that, even if they're smart. So it's a very small minority that could rise up. So they had a very, a lot of hierarchy. So he took advantage of the envy that maybe built up over, a long, long period of time. And the consequence of that is, but I don't think the Chinese people were communists. I don't think the Chinese people bought into communism. And as soon as the party goes away, they run from communism. They embrace markets and entrepreneurship and whatever, family and whatever. So I don't think it's there. It's certainly not in Japanese culture. I don't know whether we know that the Pol Pot got it from the West, not from anything local. I don't know about Vietnam. I don't know much about I don't know anything about the Vietnamese Communist Party and how it got started.
So again, national liberation movement. That's how it became.
Anti-colonialism and national liberation.
And
it looks like they've abandoned their communism as well. So
very quickly.
Yeah.
And let's speak with proofs. There was a bigger percentage of people who bought into communism in the United States than in China before, and magnitudes of difference. So communism won in China through the power of weapons and through the stupidity of the West and through Soviet aid. There was nothing. With free elections, Mao would be completely insignificant. Also, very quickly, in one of the universities I worked, we had many Chinese students. They were the ideal students, respectful, intellectually curious. Their eyes were shining for knowledge. Of course, there was selection bias. Obviously, they were the kids of the elite. But I wish all my students would ever be like my Chinese students. They were the best I ever had.
Yeah. And in terms of Christianity, I think Christianity has a big role here. I mean, I've always been pretty positive on China because they don't have Christianity. But one of the sad things about China is that when I was there, the intellectuals who were freedom fighters, the ones who believed in freedom, and the businessmen who wanted to support freedom in China were very attracted to religion. They were attracted to Christianity. They believed that what made the West was Christianity, and that is just horrible, and maybe part of why they failed. But look, Christianity is uniquely evil in human history in its veneration of human sacrifice. I mean, think about the Incas and all those who did literal human sacrifice. Christianity demands spiritual human sacrifice, and in some sense, that's more powerful and lasting. And it is so vicious. And I think you can't get the egalitarianism, let's say, of the modern left and and even of communism as a theory. I don't think you can get it without Christianity. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.
That's very generous. All right, ChatGPT has answered. So Frank Dakota estimates approximately 1.5 to 2 million people died during the Cultural Revolution from 1966 to 1976.
Okay,
in a 2016 interview accompanying his book, The Cultural Revolution: A People's History, he described them as people hounded to their deaths. In an earlier 2010 interview, before completing the book, he suggested 2 to 3 million. Based on the official, semi-official evidence then available, his later estimate is therefore somewhat lower.
Okay. Turns out I was wrong.
This is why we have ChatGPT to fact check Nikos.
But you
And
see, the good thing is that when I speak to you, I rely on actual books and not just asking ChatGPT. So I think this adds to my credibility, this mistake.
Absolutely. But it's always good to have a ChatGPT to fact check, because we all want to know when we're wrong, so we can not make the same mistake twice. All right, Michael, another $100. Thank you,
Wow.
Michael.
Thank you.
This is a two-part question. Can luck override immorality or bad moral character to some degree? If Hunter Biden didn't have that last name, he would be living in a cardboard box on the sidewalk. Instead, he's worth tens of millions of dollars and can get everything he needs in life. Luck matters. It's not just free will and philosophy.
Luck definitely matters. 3 weeks ago, we had an episode about Franco. In the first ever battle that Franco participates in, he gets a bullet in the stomach. 1 millimeter left or right, we would never have an episode about Franco. He would have died then and there. So there's no question that luck plays a role. It would be funny to have an episode about moments in history where luck impacted the final result, and it would be a very interesting philosophical exercise.
But here's the thing. Hunter Biden might not live in a cardboard box, but he's a pathetic, miserable, unhappy, horrible human being who lives in a mansion. But he still spiritually is suffering. He's not a happy person. He's not a confident person. He's not a person with self-esteem. So one way or the other, reality gets you. So it's true, it doesn't get you in quite the same way. And certainly luck plays a role in that, and being born with a son of a U.S. president and a U.S. senator makes a big difference as compared to being born on the streets. But if you're bad, if you live a horrible life, you still suffer the consequences.
Actually,
Nikos is still trying to fact check.
No. That's
ChatGPT.
No. It's completely different. I have here a note which says it sucks to be Mao, and going and checking this out, what it actually means. Page 228. It mentions all the things he suffered from, and it has the usual thing, which is insomnia. Looks like every communist leader has insomnia. But another thing is paranoia. So it says the chairman's schedule was erratic. He had anxiety attacks and depression. Listen to this. Often caused by his constant fear that other high-ranking leaders were disloyal to him. So here you have one of the most powerful men in the history of humanity, and his life sucks.
Yep.
So
and one of the reasons for the Cultural Revolution, and one of the reasons he sends it lieutenants, is because he's afraid of them. He's afraid of Deng. He's afraid of these other guys. So he sends them to countryside to be re-educated. And so, yes, luck can't save you from morality. It can save you maybe from a cardboard box, but it can't save you from morality.
And we see the same thing with Stalin. He was also very miserable, and he knew it. He knew that everyone around him was afraid of him, but also hated him. So these people did not have good lives. Being a horrible human being is not in your best interest.
Yeah. All right. Bread pants, $50. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm loving all the dialogues and the capitalism focus change from yesterday. Keep giving us intellectual, historical ammo. A scary amount of Dems around me are all now starting to be quite accepting of socialism due to the current mainstreaming.
That's why we're here.
Yeah, and the current phenomena of socialism is truly it's strange It's going to be interesting how this plays out. Chris, Also $50. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Yaron and Nikos, what does victory look like in an argument? Can we win the argument but still lose in some sense? How should we decide when debating friends or colleagues is worthwhile, and when is it better to let it go?
My overall take in this: you never win an argument. Reality decides who wins or who doesn't win. Most of the time, we have arguments with people who they are impervious to reason, so we are wasting our time, we are ruining our mood. The only proper reason to have an argument is if someone is genuinely curious, and if also you're genuinely curious. So, for example, now I'm convinced that there were more than 1 million dead in the Cultural Revolution. So it was worth having an argument on that topic. If you're not going to change your mind, you're both wasting your time. Except, and this is something I've heard from Yaron, if you're having an argument in front of an audience, in which case, though, you're not trying to persuade the other person. So again, it's not whether you win the argument, it's whether you win the audience, that they should listen to you.
I mean, so the only way to win an argument, in a sense, is, I agree with everything Nico says, but the only way to win an argument is if you cause the other person to rethink their position. That is, cause them to, and it doesn't have to happen in the moment. It could be that a year later they come to you and say, you know, you said something that day, caused me to go read, or caused me to do this, or caused me to rethink. That's winning an argument. It's very rare. It's very rare. It's very rare with people who you have a strong emotional connection with, because then the argument is wrapped up with a lot of other things like family members and friends. And this is why I generally don't believe in arguing with family members. Just leave them alone. You know, you're not going to convince them. It's like, what are you going to convince your parents that their whole life was meaningless and they held bad ideas, and now you, the youngster, are going to show them up? It's just not going to, it's the likelihood of it happening is so, I mean, you can prod them, you can test it, you can see if they're open to new ideas, but as soon as it becomes an argument, walk away. It's not worth it. It's a waste of time. Same with friends. And you have to decide if you want to keep friends who you disagree, you know, violently with. But if you decide to keep them, there's no point in harassing them. Again, prod them, see if there's an opening, if they're willing to consider some new ideas. And if they're not, what's the point? The only point of arguing publicly is to expose the ideas to a lot of people. And that's when you can really change minds, is somebody hears an argument they've never heard before, and they have to do the work. You can never persuade anybody of anything. You can plant a seed that then they have to persuade themselves. So they have to do the work. All you can do is plant seeds. So plant seeds. So mention to a coworker, no, I don't agree about that. I think we should actually, win the war in Iran quickly. I don't know, something like that. And walk away. You don't have to explain every comment you make, and then see if that planted a seed, if they're curious, if they'd like to engage or not. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you very much, Chris.
I think that's the last 50. We've got about 10 or 12 $20 questions now. All right.
That's
and then we move to the 5 and 10. So it's a long night. Not your average algorithm. I choose a lazy person to do a hard job because a lazy person will find an easy way to do it. That's a quote from Bill Gates.
I was about to say, this sounds like the worst business advice ever, but
it's Bill Gates. So, I mean, I think his conception of what laziness is maybe different than the couch potato sitting in front of his TV. You're looking for somebody who wants to get stuff done quickly, but he wants to get stuff done. And so it's a different type of laziness. The real laziness, moral laziness, or the guy who doesn't want to do anything, that you're not going to give him anything because they're not going to do anything. They're going to take their time. So I think it's a particular type of human being he's thinking of, Bill Gates.
Shout out to Mike Libovich, who brought to my attention an essay, a very short essay called Message to Garcia. I have no idea how I've lived 42 years without reading it. And it inspired me so much to be not the lazy, but the other person, the person who actually delivers. So I encourage you to go check it. It's also on YouTube. It's a little motivational essay called Message to Garcia. And it will delete from your mind this quote, which doesn't sound very serving your best interest in life.
I don't think it's very well defined, put it that way. Not your average algorithm. Does Trump's cabinet want to make us poor or rich, or do they not know what they want?
They definitely want to make themselves rich and make America a banana republic in the meanwhile, but you know more on that.
I don't think they think about you that much. I mean, it depends who in the cabinet. There are like 2 or 3 decent people in the cabinet. I think Duffy in transportation and Chris Wright in energy, who actually want to make America better. But most of them just don't care. I mean, most of them they love the power they have. They love the attention that they're getting. They're definitely, some of them, manipulating the system to get themselves and their family members super rich. Certainly Donald Trump is that way. But it's not like they want the country to be poor. They just don't care. They just don't care. They want to exploit whatever they can, whether it's through power or money. They want the thrill of the ride. And yeah, people don't go in there saying, I want to destroy America. No, they just destroy America. So, not your average algorithm. When a person can't identify cause and effect relationships, it's time to move on. They're already gone. I mean, I think that's right, but cause and effect is often difficult to ascertain. It's not easy. It's not straightforward. So figuring out when a person literally can't identify it or is just being challenged because it's hard to identify is tricky. So beware of assuming what you think is an obvious cause and effect relationship. Oh, it's obvious. Kant caused Hitler. I mean, don't you see? I mean, I get that all the time. You guys ask questions like, is the guy who shot Charlie Cook, is that because of Kant? I mean, no. Yeah, I mean, yes, in a sense, but no, not really. So you've got to think about what cause and effect you mean, how sophisticated it is, and before you write somebody off for not identifying. If somebody really can't do cause and effect, sure, then they can't think. But you have to make sure that is indeed the case. Ian, why do people latch onto altruism so religiously? I was always able to switch premises quickly when presented with a better argument.
Well, you are very good at it then, because it's not easy. And I'll just say this: altruism is not just a philosophy. It's so deep inside you that it becomes a psychological situation. So I've been into objectivism for 12 years now. Still, it's so deep inside me. Even if I've never heard of altruism, imagine someone grows up as what we call a nice guy, a people's pleaser. You know how difficult it is to get rid of this. You can be, let's say I can become the CEO of the Ayn Rand Institute for 5 decades and not have this taken out inside me. It doesn't matter how you can be the biggest authority in the history of objectivism, and still inside you it will be different to pull this off.
It's very difficult. And Liam, you're the 0.00001% who is here. You're here on the Yaron and Nikos show. So, that differentiates you already. And some of us find it more difficult. Some of us find it less difficult, depending on, I think, how you grew up and the extent to which this was part of growing up. kind of how intellectual it was, how explicit it was, how part of the culture it was. For some people it's through religion. For some people it's through kind of a secularized collectivism.
Yeah.
In different people absorb this altruism in different ways. But yeah, it becomes very much a part of your psychology. And it's work. It takes work, decades of work to get rid of it. And some people are lucky and they either grow up without that or they rebel against it very young, and therefore have an easier time shedding it. But I think it's because it's connected to religion and culture and family and your relationship with everybody else. And it's just every part of, I mean, who are the heroes? The heroes, I mean, are always the people who sacrifice. Superman is admired because he's willing to sacrifice.
So that creates a feedback mechanism that then altruism is rewarded, and the more it's rewarded, the deeper its roots become.
Liam, can you start doing reaction videos to Michael Sandel's Justice course at Harvard, which gets millions of downloads, and he regularly attacks capitalism and inequality? That is really interesting. It's an interesting idea. Yeah, I mean, I think that's, yeah, I'll have to watch a few episodes. The problem with reaction videos, you saw this a little bit yesterday on Friday when I did my reaction video, is if you're reacting to a long form video, there's no end to it. Like, so for every 10 seconds the guy talks, I have 5 minutes of commentary. So now extrapolate to a Michael Sandel hour lecture. So it's difficult. Now I can tease out segments, which is a lot of work, and then I feel bad because I know the segments I didn't tease out, I had stuff to say about them too, and I don't want to imply that I agreed with what he said there. It's hard. The reaction videos like 3 minutes of Tucker Carlson are easy because yeah, it's 3 minutes and you've got a million things to say against it, but a whole hour is hard. But let me take a look at one of Sandel's talks and see of the class and see. I remember watching his Introduction to Morality course, which was also viewed by millions and millions. And he starts out the course with the trolley problem as the essence of morality, and it drives me crazy.
We had to go through his book in the Objectivist Academic Center back in the day. I think it was called Do You Kill the Fat Man or something like that.
Oh, and then he had another book that I remember we commented on. I did a thing with Uncle, I think, on his thing on merit. He has an anti-merit.
Oh, yeah, we did that as well. Oh, maybe we did 2 books of Sandel now.
I think we did that as well, yeah. All right, Arthur, is AI
the tyranny of merit, the tyranny of merit.
The what?
The tyranny of merit.
Tyranny of merit, that's right. That's right. Is AI like neurons in our brain? They're self-learning when placed in a given environment or context. I don't know. And I don't even know that what you're saying about neurons is right. What does it mean that neurons are self-learning if you put them in an environment or context? If there's no consciousness, are the neurons really, if I just take the neurons out of my brain, if we take the brain matter and we put neurons in a vat, are they self-learning in a given environment or context? Without a consciousness? I don't think so. So I don't know. It's very dangerous to make analogies, particularly with large language models. Large language models are basically, they're not connected to reality. This is the real important thing. Our brain is connected to reality through our senses. All conscious beings are connected to reality through senses. What LLMs are the rationalists' ideal. They are connected to words. They're connected to language, not even to concepts, because concepts are reliant on reality. But they're not connected to reality behind the words that make up the words. They're not connected to concepts. They're not conceptual. They're connected to words and how words go together. Now, it's miraculous how good these AI systems are, given that basically just in the end, algorithms shuffling words around. It's amazing how well they function given that. But don't confuse them with anything the brain does. The brain relies on stimuli from outside of itself. LLMs have no stimuli from outside of itself that it learns from. Now, you give it stimuli, but all it gets from you are more words. It doesn't get anything of reality. It doesn't sense. There's no sensing capabilities. Even when AI, quote, sees, it's not really seeing. It's analyzing zeros and ones, pixels. And that's not what your eye does, and it's not what your brain does. It's not what your eye does, but it's certainly not what your brain does. So it's not at the level of sensation, never mind at the level of perception, never mind at the level of conception. It's just at the level of words. So, how does it do what it does? I don't know. How is it as good as it is? I don't know. And the scary and interesting thing is, even the people who program it don't exactly know. So, there's still a lot of work to do in the philosophy of AI, which I'm hoping some philosophers do because it's confusing. Arthur, can you have high self-esteem and still be insecure?
You would need a good psychologist to answer this question. So based on what could we, maybe based on introspection, okay, so I don't know, that's beyond my pay grade.
I mean, look, it depends what you mean by insecure. Can you have high self-esteem, but still, never done public speaking and feel insecure about going in front of an audience and speaking to them? Yeah, absolutely. You haven't mastered that particular skill. You haven't earned security in that particular skill, and you've got to work on it. So, but you can't have high self-esteem and be an insecure person. That is underlying your nature's insecurity. You can be insecure about a task, a specific context, but not about who you are and what you are. I think that's right. But I agree with Nikos. Psychologists are better at that one. Shruti says, cheers to 10 episodes of the show. Thank you, Shruti.
Oh, thank you very much.
Shazbot, have I been paying too much for Yaron Nikos team movie reviews? I assumed that the price would be doubled since you are splitting the super chat. But now you are reviewing a movie for a regular price. All right, Shazbot, you get a freebie for paying double. You get a freebie. So,
but please make it a mainstream. Make it Apocalypse Now, Jaws, Casablanca.
Make it something that Nikos can easily find. In other words,
or that I've watched many times, because these are three of my favorite movies. Yeah.
Which ones? Jaws,
Apocalypse Now, Casablanca, Whiplash, Interstellar. Make it one of these.
Yeah, maybe make it a different movie so we broaden Nikos's movie horizons.
By the way, if you are into,
have you ever seen Ninotchka?
Ninotchka is Zizek's famous favorite movie, so I watched scenes of it during my Zizekian era. I don't think I've ever watched from start to end.
Right, you need to watch it from start to end. But I can't believe it's Zizek's favorite movie.
Oh yeah. Together with The Fountainhead.
He has great aesthetic taste.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite movies. So, and it's got a good communist spin on it.
Yep.
So Shazbot, you get a freebie. So let us know what you want. Next movie review, we give you half price. The next 2 movie reviews, we give you half price.
I think we've told him 3 different things.
Yeah, I don't know. But something. You'll figure it out, Shazbot. Shazbot is good at figuring stuff out. Mary, how would you compare Trump and Mao? Oh, God. Certainly, they share a total indifference to human suffering and death. They both go all in on policies that clearly don't work. Did Mao also act on whim?
This is like this escalated quickly. So the main difference is that they have, first of all, completely different things they rely on. Trump has this political charisma. Mao had zero charisma. Mao was a very good administrator. He knew at every moment with detailed how many acres of land are there. So he had the thing that Trump doesn't have, which is patience to go deep. He was good with using people as pawns. Whereas Trump is more like, okay, he's erratically having fights with everyone. So they rely on completely different things. The vast majority of the Chinese people who adored Mao have never seen or heard Mao, which is different with Trump, who relies on these things. So we're talking about two completely different styles of doing politics.
Yeah, and I don't know if Trump was doing something and people were dropping dead. I think Trump would change his policy.
Yeah.
I don't put him in the same category of evil as Mao or Stalin or Hitler or these people. Now, I think they're all smarter than him. I don't think he's particularly smart, but I don't think it's a situation where literally people, remember, Trump was for lockdowns during COVID, not because he's an authoritarian, he wants to lock us all down. He's not that sophisticated, but because he thought it was the solution, right? People infect one another, lock them down, they won't infect one another. That's the way to solve it. So he's not evil in the same category as those guys at all. So there's not that viciousness. He doesn't care. He cares a little bit. He cares what people think about him. I don't think Mao was a narcissist. I don't think Stalin was a narcissist. Trump is a narcissist. He wants people to love him at the end of the day. He cares about you because he cares about what you think of him.
It's very difficult to find a historical parallel. Maybe in some aspects Mussolini, but also Mussolini is... we should do a show at some point on Mussolini. The entertainment value in the biographies of Mussolini is out of this world. And again, he did some very bad things, but as a persona, it will make of a very interesting show.
But yeah, no, I don't think we should exaggerate. Trump is bad enough without exaggerating. Thomas, does limited war have a meaningful definition? It seems like all wars do not need total, no surrender. War seems too big. Why go to war if it doesn't involve complete victory? What's another purpose of war? I mean, it could be to just shake a regime into doing what it's told, to behave themselves. That's possible. So not all wars need to be total wars. You could achieve different goals by different means, depending on what your goal is. But if your goal is total victory, it's unlikely you're going to achieve it without some form of total war. At least a willingness to go there. But yeah, different military actions are going to have different goals. We've got 100 Canadian dollars, 100 Canadian. Great show. I haven't been, this is summer. I haven't been able to watch these live for a while, so here are funds for some past future ones. Thank you. Really appreciate that. That's great. Okay, Andrew. Instagram is giving me regular Candace Owen clips. Aside from the insult by the algorithm, I think you should be insulted. It seems to me that her method of explaining cultural events starts with the axiom that the official explanation is a lie, which needs exposure. A healthy skepticism of the honesty of government officials is justified, yes? If so, how should that manifest in one's method of analyzing events versus conspiracy theorizing? What's a rational approach?
First of all, what Candace does is the new right version of postmodernism, which is there is no truth. Everything that someone says has to be viewed through the prism of power. If someone who is powerful says something, this is because they want to exert power on you. So she has the epistemology of a postmodernist. These
Yep.
people, they're going to tell you, oh, Foucault, postmodernist neo-Marxists, they are the postmodernist neo-Marxists. And the worst element of that is contrarianism, which means your criteria whether something is true is who says it. If the people who I dislike say it, then I'm not going to believe it, and I will believe the exact opposite. So so skepticism would be, this person has said lies in the past, let me check what he said. What Candace does is, this person I have reasons not to like him, therefore, without thinking or looking at reality, I will believe the exact opposite. So that's how I see the difference with skepticism.
Yes, in terms of being skeptical of what government officials have to say, yes, you should be, but there has to be a context. Skepticism about what government officials and law enforcement say about a particular crime, you've got to have reason to be skeptical of that. Skeptical about what the Secretary of War says about a story in the Washington Post about munitions, yeah, you should believe a word he says. You don't necessarily believe the Washington Post, but you've got to accumulate evidence and evaluate. But you've got to think about what is the motivation? What are they trying to hide? What's actually going on? You've got to do some thinking, real thinking about the context and the motivation. And also just what makes sense, right? Does it make sense that the Jews killed Charlie Cook? Does it make sense that there was a plane from Egypt there was tracking Charlie Cook, according to Candace? And how is that related to the Jews and to Israel? And she finds a relationship. But when it starts getting so ridiculous, all right, so it just doesn't make any sense. There's no, in logic, any connection between the two. Or does it make sense that some crazy leftist who was antagonized by things Charlie Cook was saying on campus decided to shoot him? I mean, that's so much more rational of an explanation. You would need a lot of evidence to tell me, no, it's something schemier than just that simple explanation, given that the guy has been caught and, it's...
Well, this is brought to you by the person who believes that Mossad managed to pull off 9/11.
Yes.
And then they filmed themselves taking out Israeli flags and celebrating. I mean, this disqualifies, like, if this person tells me tonight it's Sunday, I will check my calendar. I won't believe him.
Yeah, absolutely. So a healthy skepticism has to be a skepticism within context, and you have to have reason for the skepticism. You have to have a rational reason for it. Andrew, unsure if Candace is being exact, but she claims her podcast is top 10 in popularity worldwide. But
unfortunately, I checked it some time ago. So there was a time where in the top 5, you could find Joe Rogan, Candace, and Tucker. Both of them, or 3 of the top 5 were these 3. That was more than a year ago. I haven't checked since then.
Candace has declined. They've all declined. I don't know about Joe Rogan, but Candace and Tucker, almost all the right-wing podcasters have all declined over the last year. But Andrew goes on to say, what does that mean about the state of the culture? It means it's shitty. It means it's really, really bad. But by the way, because you're watching them on Instagram, and because the algorithm is feeding them to you, Andrew, you're part of the problem, because you're being added to her ranking. Every time you watch one of those videos, she gets another hit.
So in December, we did a podcast with the Ayn Rand Institute on Nick Fuentes, and I was adding up his interview views across platforms. We're talking about tens of millions. It was particularly worse than I expected.
Yep. Yeah. No, the state of the culture is really, really, really bad. And the state of the right is really, really, really bad.
And this was back of the envelope maps of platforms I could reach. I didn't even check tweets, which is their fiefdom.
Jeffrey, you're on. I'll email you Paris recommendations. I'm not going to Paris. But yeah, send me the recommendations for Paris anyway. Nikos, are you equally enthusiastic about restaurants?
The answer is no. I'm equally enthusiastic about my cooking, and I'm not a big fan of restaurants.
Nikos
Also, I can't afford them, the restaurants, particularly that Yaron can afford. So,
yep. All right, let's do the stickers quickly. Geoffrey, thank you for the sticker. And
that sounds like Jeffrey.
But it's spelled weird, so I don't know who it is. Stephanie, thank you. And I need a better system for stickers.
Also, if there were only a couple of more questions, we would break the limit of 3 hours.
We're going to break the limit of 3 hours pretty easily. We still have all the $5 and $10 questions. Bonnie, thank you. I know it's late for Nikos, so it's late for me, and it's very late for Nikos.
It's worth it. It's okay.
Wes, thank you. $100 sticker plus $100 question. Really appreciate that.
Thank you.
And there's Roland, and there's Exit and Chill and Dennis. And thank you guys. I really appreciate it. All right. If I missed anybody in the stickers, thank you to all of those who I missed and didn't name. I try to catch everybody. All right, let's do these quickly. These are oh God, a lot of them. Okay. Some of them are going to be short. Liam says, life is opportunity, not confinement. Yes. Life is not confinement, it's opportunity.
Gail, that.
Could some people escape over borders from China?
Oh, people have escaped, yes. And actually, this is how we know. There was a whole section that I prepared on the Gulag system of China. We didn't even get to that. But yeah, there were many people who actually escaped.
I mean, because a lot of people...
It's such a big country. Hong Kong was near. Back then, it was an option. Taiwan. It was reasonably easier to escape than North Korea, let's say.
Yeah, I mean, certainly a lot of people fled to Hong Kong. They went on raft. Hong Kong is closed. Taiwan is far. Taiwan is harder to get to, but Hong Kong was relatively close. Okay.
Sorry, you needed a passport system inside China, so it's not just you get in the train and you go.
All right. Wurzel says, Nikos, I've seen the Odyssey. Still not quite sure what makes it great for you. It's pretty and has hype moments and aura, but light on any memorable characters. Not even Odysseus seems that heroic.
Where's our disagreement? I said that as all Nolan films, it has its memorable moments. It is not as bad as the woke right warriors would have you believe. And it has nice moments and nice aesthetics. And of course, Agamemnon, who is an unforgettable figure. That's it. I don't think we disagree on our evaluation.
It's like somebody's shooting fireworks right outside my window. There's a boom, 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 boom. Anyway,
I hope it's fireworks and not people shooting, but yeah.
I hope it's fireworks, yes. Another one went off. All right. Wurzel, you should check out my review of the Odyssey that I did a week and a bit ago.
I was about to say I don't disagree with a single word you said there,
okay.
Except the war crime stuff, but we can discuss this when we discuss also Troy.
What did I say about war crimes? And in the context of the time,
yeah, in the context of the time, yes, there was nothing to be ashamed of. But I think even then, some of the things that they do is sacrilege, even for that particular context.
Yeah. Okay, good. We'll talk about it in Troy. All right. What do you make of Maria Montessori going for? This is from Adam. going from being a personal friend of Mussolini to running an orphanage for children of anarchists who died in the Spanish Civil War.
When we talk about Mussolini, you'll see Mussolini was Mussolini was socialist throughout his life. Sometimes inside the closet, sometimes outside of the closet. Now, his relation with Montessori, it's more complicated, so I don't have a good answer to that. But even the Italian left till the end, they saw Mussolini more as a traitor rather than someone on the other side.
Do you know anything about her running an orphanage for children for anarchists in the Spanish Civil War?
Unfortunately not. It's the first time I actually hear about this.
Yeah, I don't know. I do know that, somebody I admire and have a lot of respect of, Arturo Toscanini, the famous conductor. When Mussolini came to the forefront of Italian politics, Toscanini was intrigued and interested and was friendly. And as he learned more about Mussolini, he turned against him and ultimately became a major enemy of Mussolini's. And Mussolini had his thugs beat him up, and ultimately Toscanini had to flee Italy. But yeah, I mean, a lot of these people were socialists, or had a leaning to the left. And Mussolini, in his beginning, seemed like a kind of a friendly socialist, and his thuggishness came out over time. And as it did, a lot of the better people turned against him.
And remember that the futurist movement joined en masse the fascist movement. So he had a lot of impact on the avant-garde.
Yep. Michael, was there anything different about Mao compared to Hitler or Stalin?
Was there something different on Mao? Yes, that Mao was more eager to push the revolution to the end. So he didn't have to do the great leap forward. The land was already collectivized, but he had zero inhibitions. He had this voluntarism that I want it done, therefore it will be done. And that's why he left all these piles of corpses. Now, comparing him with Hitler, would have to have a whole discussion on Hitler. Very, very different, very, very different characters and very different leadership style with Hitler. The one thing they have in common is they didn't want to get their hands dirty. So Hitler claimed, "Oh, I don't know what happens in these camps," and Mao did the same. Whereas Stalin knew exactly what's happening. He had lists with people who were. So of all these people, Stalin is the one who had more direct blood in his hands.
Thomas, do you know any objectivist who runs a Michelin-star restaurant in the United States? If so, do you remember the name and location of the restaurant? Yes, he was on here a few minutes ago. Jeffrey Miller. Jeffrey Miller owns and runs a Bar Miller in New York City, which has one Michelin star and is fabulous. It's really, really, really good. I've eaten there a few times.
I also know Glenn Agritelli used to run restaurants. I don't know if they were Michelin.
Probably not, because I don't think Texas had Michelin back then.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, but yeah. So check out Bar Miller in New York City. The action. Do either of you have an opinion of the book movie The Name of the Rose?
That's annoying because I'd have to rewatch it because I've watched it ages and ages ago with Sean Connery. The book was something like Dan Brown at some point in Greece. Everyone had read it, but we're talking about Umberto Eco. We're talking.
Yeah.
I was in my preteen years, so I don't remember much.
So I loved the movie. I really enjoyed the movie, and I think I read the book. The book is better, and I really enjoyed the book. So again, it's a long time ago, but my memory of both is very positive.
And it's a big book. It's not.
It's a big book. It's quite intellectual. It gets to Aristotle, I think, and it's a good read. But I don't remember the details. But I remember watching the movie and then reading the book because I was intrigued by the movie. All right, Cobb, what are your thoughts on Piker's admiration of Mao?
It is nihilism because I don't think he knows anything about Mao except the stuff that he pissed off all the right kind of people to piss off if you're Hassan Piker. So it just shows that he's unhinged. And also it shows you what these people are about. Because even Hassan Piker, I don't think he would challenge the figures. So if someone doesn't think that even 30 million dead is a big deal, it tells you all you need to know. The problem is not Hassan Piker. The problem is that the New York Times and Mamdani and all these people consider Piker one of their own. That you would find some degenerates who appreciate Mao, that's one thing. The fact that the democratic establishment, or actually the democratic opinion makers, would embrace that person, that's the bad news.
Yeah, it's absolutely nihilism. He knows the numbers. He knows how bad Mao was, and he doesn't care. Carbosa says, isn't Chiang Kai-shek admirer of the Soviets as well?
No, it was mostly for a marriage of convenience. So Chiang Kai-shek, already from his first visit to Moscow, then he recollects, okay, these people want us as tools. So I don't think he was an admirer of the Soviets. He's not a great guy, by the way. I don't remember because now it's a haze in my mind. If Yaron said it or I read it somewhere, Taiwan under Chiang Kai-shek is not a free economy. So he doesn't, but there's no question he would be better than Mao. Yep. Infinitely better.
Cobb, please do a show on Carl Schmitt.
Many people have requested this. This would mean we'd have to read Carl Schmitt, and it's not pleasant, but we'll do it at some point.
Okay. Ryan, a serial killer murders 20 people, and he's the worst evil. A communist murders millions, and he's a hero, or made a mistake but meant well. It's bizarre. There is a line. God, what I can't remember the name of the movie, but it's a Charlie Chaplin movie. It's his one talkie. It's the Charlie Chaplin where he talks, and it's about a man who kills rich, lonely women and takes their money, and he's on trial, and that's exactly what he says. So this is right after World War II, or something like that, and what he says from when he's when he's making his case, he says, a person who kills out of pity or whatever, one or two people is a criminal, but you kill a million people, you're a hero. So it's his anti-war statement. Charlie Chaplin was famously anti-war, and sadly another socialist. I mean, unfortunately, there was a period in human history where almost all the intellectuals were socialists.
Yeah,
it's hard. The people with talent, and yet were infected with socialism.
Yeah. Speaking of which, also Jean-Paul Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir visited Mao's China. They were VIPs. So yeah, don't get me started on all these people.
Yeah. Enric, why has the West abandoned Taiwan and kowtowed to the CCP? Doesn't the West see the consequences? Well, I mean, this is Kissinger, right? I mean, this is the deal that Nixon and then Ford and then Jimmy Carter made with China. And the deal was, we'll normalize relations, but China would only normalize relations with the West on condition that the West basically demoted Taiwan from status of sovereign nation. So Taiwan was kicked out of the United Nations. Taiwan was kicked out of all the multinational organizations in 70. I can't even remember the mid to late 70s, and it's all because the West views China as more important. It was coming up to 1 billion people. It was again. It has this history of civilization. It's a major country, and everybody wanted a relationship with them. The strategic idea was that of Nixon and Kissinger was it would be a bulwark against the Soviet Union. But the whole West followed the United States. This is an American invention, this idea of cozying up to the CCP and having a negative relationship with Taiwan.
And ask yourselves, where would China be today if Clinton and then Bush had not invited China in the World Trade Organization?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's the sin. I think the sin is before that. But
no, but I mean the whole process.
Where would China be without Western capital flowing in there since the late 1970s, early 80s, even before the World Trade Organization? But I don't, my worry is not that. My worry is that we kowtow to them, not in the economic sense, but in the political and military sense.
But the thing is, at that point in the 70s, China needs the United States 100 times more than the United States needs China.
And I would argue it still does. But, and that's the difficulty. But it was invited into the World Trade Organization in 2000.
Just after the bombings of Serbia, because people say that because by mistake NATO bombed the Chinese embassy, that was like to appease them.
So it was late 90s, early 2000s when that happened. By then, China was already a powerhouse manufacturing-wise and very able. Bringing it into the World Trade Organization made sense, I think. You'd have to figure out what your relationship with China had to be earlier than that. And again, I think the relationship need to be, oh no, we're recognizing Taiwan. You're never going to have Taiwan unless it's a democratic merger, unless it's a free merger. And yeah, if you want to sell us stuff, we'll buy it. But beyond that, we're not cooperating with you beyond that. But the reason was pragmatism. I mean, the pragmatism of Kissinger, basically. Matt, thank you both for all you've taught me. I think the average American would doubt the legitimacy of these stories, thinking it's too over the top.
I told you, today is one of the episodes and it turns out I undersold the evil of China.
Yeah, and the point is, this is not, I mean, Nikos does all the reading, but this is not hard to find, right? If you ask ChatGPT how many people Mao killed, it'll tell you. It won't hide. It'll give you the ranges and everything. Historians know this. And what happens is people like, what's his name, that stupid economist that I debated, the communists.
Wolf.
He'll say, oh, it was famines, it was accident, it was this, it was that. But they won't doubt the numbers. They're not. But any decent historian, and the evils of communism have been so well documented. What's his name? Pipes, the father, has, what does he have? The Black Book of Communism?
Yeah, by Kurt. I had it somewhere here. Yeah, I used it for.
I mean, there's so many books, articulating this. I think people just don't care. I don't think that they don't know. They don't want to know. They don't want to know, and they don't care. So it happened a long time ago. What relevance does it have to me, right? They don't even care now about the Nazis, right? So they watch Tucker Carlson, and he tells them that Churchill was really the villain of World War II, and they go, okay, man, that's fine. So be it. Andrew, sorry if you already specifically addressed this, but is your impression that Mao was a power-lusting second-hander who used communism to gain control, or a true believer in communist principles?
Both. The one thing does not disqualify the other. There was zero reason to do the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution if you are not a true believer in communism. So he was both a power luster and a true believer because communism was his vehicle to power.
Ryan says, after midterms, might Trump unleash on Iran? Thanks
Why?
for the awesome show, guys. Why
Why
would you
would he
think
do
that?
it after the midterms?
Because the American people don't want a war, so they don't like Trump right now. So they might, if he unleashes a war, they'll vote Democratic. The exact opposite is true. Winners win. If he had won the war in Iran, the Republicans would be doing a lot better right now in the polls, a lot better. It's losing that American people don't like. It's not wars that they don't like. The problem is all the wars that we've had, we've lost. But it's not wars they don't like. They don't like losing. And Trump is a loser. But why would you think that he really wants to win, but he won't do it because of the election? He's given no indication that he knows how to win, what it would take to win, what winning looks like, what victory means, what unleashing means. None of those concepts have any meaning in his mind. And why would you think that he has that, or knows what it is? He's just talk. Time modid. I don't know. You guys have anyway. Prager claims China is in lockstep with Islamism, yet Mao's the modern CCP's treatment of Muslims suggests otherwise. I don't know why Prager claims that.
Actually, Muslims are as far as I know, or at least they were institutionally persecuted.
They still are. And China has a real Muslim problem. They have a significant percentage of their minority population is Muslim. They have Muslim neighbors. Their entire western border is Muslim. And it's not just Muslim passive. There are a lot of Islamists in that area, the area of Turkmenistan and Kazakhstan and all these other countries have significant Islamist factions that have infected the Uyghurs in China, and they have a Muslim problem. And they're persecuting the Muslims as a consequence. So no, I don't believe that. I mean, China is also pragmatic. So they will support the Muslims when they attack the West. But they also, have them at arm's length. So it's like Russia. Russia will support Islamists when they attack the West. But Russia has a big Islamist problem. You see this in the constant terrorist attacks in Moscow. So, they have a love-hate relationship.
Speaking of persecuting religions, if you have anyone who has the Black Book of Communism, check the section on Tibet. There's a whole different chapter there that we could discuss today, the Chinese suppression in Tibet.
Yep. Singapore, Hong Kong, and Taiwan rank highly in economic freedom and have Han majority populations. There may be a link. Chinese people favor markets. Yeah, Chinese people generally have favored markets, but they haven't necessarily favored individual rights and property rights and things like that in their past. Singapore and Hong Kong are directly inspired by the British. You cannot explain their history without an explanation. Hong Kong is imposed by the British. Singapore is inspired by the British. And Taiwan only became market friendly after at the same time as Korea did. So it was part of a move, a post-Thatcher kind of 1980s move away from socialism towards markets. So I don't think it's the Chinese Han that explain it. It is true that the Chinese, wherever they go in the world, are very entrepreneurial.
And then an irony of history, Hong Kong plays a big role in the liberalization of the Chinese economy, or however you want to call it. But the only reason this happened is Hong Kong is British still when it is 90-something. So if Hong Kong was Chinese after the Second World War and in the hands of Mao, maybe the post-1970s and 80s Chinese progress would be severely curtailed without Hong Kong.
Absolutely. Hong Kong was the model, and Deng knew it. Part of the reason he liberalizes the first area he liberalizes, allows for markets, is the area adjacent to Hong Kong. And the reason is everybody's escaping to Hong Kong. And the Communist Party officials want to build a fence to stop them. And he says, no, let's instead figure out what they're doing in Hong Kong and bring it here. And he says, let's start by attracting foreign capital and liberalizing and letting entrepreneurs go and see what happens. And only when it's successful does he bring it to Shanghai and other places. So Hong Kong is a model. China doesn't have the recovery post-78 without Hong Kong.
Shout out also to our friend Ryan. Imagine this episode without my standing desk. Imagine 3 hours and 20 minutes without the standing desk. Ryan,
I'm
thank
sitting.
you again.
I'm sitting because I'm not at home. At home, I have the standing desk. I know, it's painful. The walk is going to be painful as I walk away from here. Okay. Would old communists be excited about AI?
Would old communists be excited about AI? All communists, as a rule, are not excited by anything. If I judge from family members, they think... so Varoufakis, for example, is in theory excited about AI, but he says it's an oligarchic tool and should be democratized, as if, the masses could have created AI and now they should claim it back.
Okay, Taim says, many AFD politicians praise China's treatment of Muslims and want it replicated in the EU. Nikos, have you heard Europe's new right praising the CCP?
No, I haven't heard that. And I wouldn't be surprised if they find authoritarian solutions. I haven't heard much though.
All right. TM says, if China becomes the world's top power under liberal democracy, would that be good for the world, even if it had remained a semi-free mixed economy?
Obviously.
Yeah, it would be fantastic for the world, right? And for the Chinese. But yes,
imagine
would
all
benefit.
These people, their creativity unleashed. Yeah, there would be it would be good for them, and the ripple effects good for us.
INNAKR. I don't know what that is. All right. Do we openly underestimate the United States Constitution by seriously considering a possibility of dictatorship in the United States?
Who is
no. I don't know who we are, but no, I don't. It's not an issue of the Constitution. Constitution is great. It's an issue about the people. The Constitution doesn't impose itself on us. The Constitution cannot protect us from dictatorship. It's people interpreting the Constitution. It's the courts, it's Congress, it's the president, maybe it's even the military at some point. The people sworn to defend the Constitution who could give us a dictatorship and throw the Constitution into the dustbin of history. The Constitution has no power except for the power the people give it. So it's people. It's not so.
And if you doubt people, go check the Soviet constitution, even the Stalinist constitution. It's brilliant. You would say, this country that has this constitution, I can't wait to visit.
Matt, Nikos, could you see the Knicks going back to back?
Every team that has won the title and has not changed begins the season as among the favorites. So yes, East is going to be more difficult this year, but it's in the top 4 favorites. There's no question about it. Again, Oklahoma, Knicks, Spurs, Philadelphia.
Nikos and I agree for once about basketball. Okay, Andrew, does having a concentration of great restaurants in a certain geographic area a sign of a healthy culture in that area?
Those who have experienced that culture should answer.
I mean, think about the cities that have great restaurants. Paris. Does Paris have a great culture? It used to. I don't know. I don't know how you would rank Paris's culture today. Rome has great culture. Its restaurants okay. I don't think they're that great. I think London is a place with good restaurants and good culture. Culture's in decline. Restaurants are on the uprise, are improving. So my bottom line answer is no, I don't think the two are necessary. Barcelona, where I'm at right now, probably has some of the best food in the world. Does it have the best culture in the world? No. It's got good culture, but it's not. Anyway,
I
how to
took
tell
out
exactly,
Yaron in a
how to tell
tavern.
exactly what all that means. Yeah, Nikos.
I took out Yaron in a tavern in Athens in 2021, and now I have in retrospect embarrassment why I chose that and not all the other good options that we have. But it wasn't that bad.
It wasn't bad. It was good food. It was good food. I'm not a snob when it comes to food. So I'll get some food at the on the street corner, but but I like good food too. So, all right, last question. Mary Aline says, ask Matt Bateman about Montessori. He's an expert. Yes, he is.
That's true.
I will ask. All right, Nikos, we broke our record, I think, for our shows.
One day we're going to break the Joe Rogan Alex Jones record, which I think was 5 hours or something.
I've done 5 hours.
Really?
Yeah, I did it on a New Year's Eve show.
Wow.
My New Year's Eve shows are usually between 4 to 5 hours.
Wow.
And that's just me. We got one more question coming in. Raul says, would you consider a program regarding Suharto and Sukamo? Very intriguing. The Year of Living Dangerously is a fabulous movie of that epoch. I remember really liking The Year of Living Dangerously when it came out. This is a long, long time ago.
Is it about Indonesia?
Yes. So Suharto was the dictator of Indonesia. That would take a lot of research because I don't think either of us know anything about it.
Well, I know it will be the second more depressing episode after Cambodia, maybe third after China, because the massacres in Indonesia are absolutely horrendous. And everyone should watch, people, a movie called The Act of Killing. The Act of Killing or something like that. They go back and they find some of the worst murderers of that era. And these are people who have zero repent, who are actually proudly want to reenact their murders. And it's the most surreal thing I've ever watched in my life.
All right, we got another one from Andrew. For those who read a lot of history, it's a good habit to sometimes take a break from reading about dark, depressing past events of mankind and read instead about mankind's great past achievements. Inspiration is a value. That is true. Are you hinting here, Andrew, that we should do shows about the positive errors in history?
Well, the problem is my expertise is in the depressing stuff. So
Nikos is an expert on the darkest left and the darkest right.
But hey, 2 weeks from now, Mike Menzer. So this
Mike
is
Menzer. And we should do that. We should do some stuff, and this will get you to read some good stuff. We should do some stuff on the Enlightenment. We should do some stuff on the Renaissance. You look skeptical.
I have zero base on that. I would have to start from zero. That's not easy, but maybe.
Oh, maybe
the Greek Revolution at some point.
What's that?
The Greek Revolution and the Enlightenment, the role the Enlightenment played in Greek Revolution. We can do this in March when we have our Independence Day.
We can do that. But yeah, the Enlightenment is fascinating. So I can, if you ever want, I can send you the books to read. I've read a lot, but I don't quite retain it as well as Nikos does. Nikos retains the details.
Well, let's finish with this. The best thing to do when you read the book is to create your own table of contents. So you say, for example, page 11, Roosevelt handing China to Stalin. So now when I repeat the book, I remember also what was in. So this is an excellent method of retaining.
That is very good. Yep. I could just have ChatGPT read the book for me and make those notes for me.
It's never the same.
No, it's not.
I find something very.
I'm kidding.
No to that.
Yes, no. There's nothing quite that can replace reading a book. Right now, I'm reading a book about. My book right now is Project.
You are muted. We lost Yaron or we lost both. I don't know if people can hear me, but I cannot hear Yaron. Maybe we can just say bye to people.
2, 3.
Oh,
Right,
now
you
we
hear me
can
now?
hear you again.
Yeah, the battery on my wireless mic, we went so long that it basically died.
So maybe we should
So-
just say goodbye to people
For
at this
long
point.
shows, we shouldn't count on wireless, battery operated. I was saying the book I'm reading right now is called Project Maven, which is about the U.S. military's adoption of AI, and it's fascinating. It's really interesting. It's also interesting what the author chooses to focus on, which is basically shows the impact of just war theory on everything. But for another show, we'll talk about that. Bye, everybody. Next week, we are talking about Patrick Deneen, the living scholar at Notre Dame University, a Catholic post-liberal. You'll see what we have to say about him. And in 2 weeks, we've got Mike Mensa, the bodybuilding objectivist. So, and maybe we'll add somebody to that. So, surprise guest, a surprise addition to Mike Mensa. So, potentially. All right, everybody. See you next week.
See
Bye.
you.